All right, signing on. Official Loft Sports Podcast on the Loft Sports Podcast and Network. Loft Sports Podcast can be found wherever you consume your podcast. Tonight, I've got our guy Tommy back on the pod. Tom, what's going on, brother?
Nothing, man. It's a day closer to Friday. I'm looking forward to the weekend. We got some college basketball rolling. The NHL's coming back, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, definitely. Good to see the NHL's back. Came back last night. I was caught a little bit of the Sabres-Devils game. We were talking about the Sabres a little bit on the last pod when we were talking about NFL free agency. So
They won, right?
yeah, they won. They beat New Jersey 2-1.
Yeah, I was watching the Maple Leafs Lightning game. The Lightning look good, man. They look really
They're a
freaking
good
good.
team, man. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think they definitely play the best defense from what I've seen
Yep.
in the league. But yeah, we're not going to make this a hockey pod tonight, folks. So we're going to continue our path through NFL free agency here. So last week we touched upon 10 of the teams. We're going to do another 10 tonight. Yeah, we're gonna do the same thing. I've got the AFC, Tom's got the NFC, and we're gonna roll through 10 more teams as the NFL Combine's in the full swing this week. So I don't think I haven't seen anybody run any drills yet. Does the drills start this week, tonight, or have they started?
Started today. So,
It
or
starts
I
today.
I think
Okay.
measurement stuff was today. They're going through stuff. Well, all that stuff will be, out by Sunday. I'm curious to see some of the measurements on some of these guys, what
I
some of these guys weigh in at. I'm not a big arm length guy. I know that's always a hot debate, but I'm always curious about what some of these edge guys weigh in at. So
well,
I'm keeping my eye on that.
I will say in terms of the arm length, folks may have seen already. Ruben Bain's arm length was like in God, it was very much like his, I think since the NFL Combine started and they started doing measuring arm lengths, his was like one of the lowest ever
Yeah, I
recorded.
believe that.
And at this point, like basically for him, if he were to have a successful NFL career, it's almost looked at like he would be an extreme outlier to be as successful as he was, as we saw this past year at Miami.
That stuff's always interesting, right? We'll talk about it when we get back to the draft talk
Yeah,
more.
we're
But
getting a little ahead of
when you
ourselves
when you
here with
pop
the
the tape
talking
on,
draft, but yeah, let's get
yeah,
into it. So I got for the folks watching on YouTube and our website, I've got the spinner wheel back up. So we're gonna spin this to see if we start off with the AFC or the NFC. So let's get it going. As soon as I find my mouse here. All right, here we go. Let's see. Who are we thinking? Who are we gonna get first tonight? I hope it's gonna be me. Who we got?
oh, it's you,
The team I'm fond of.
Dolphins.
The Miami Dolphins, a team that is definitely in the process of going through a rebuilding phase. They've already made a couple of moves. Let's see, let me just get to my Dolphins notes here. Bringing in a new GM, a new coach. All right, Miami Dolphins. So let's touch upon their 2025 season that just finished. So Dolphins go 7-10. They missed the playoffs for the second consecutive season, and that led to a total organization overhaul. So let's go back. They began the year, remember, 1-6, and that led to the firing of their longtime general manager, Chris Greer. He got actually let go on October 31st, and then basically after he got let go, Miami began to really turn it around. They ended up winning 5 of their next 6 games, and they managed to stay in the playoff picture until basically like mid-December. They were hanging around there, but a late season loss to the Steelers officially eliminated them. And as they headed into the offseason originally, it appeared like Mike McDaniel's job was going to be safe. But then, and that he would be back in Miami for at least one more season, but plans ended up changing, and they decided to go with a complete organization overhaul, like I said, and he was let go on January 8th of 26. So Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer go out. In comes Jeff Hafley as the new head coach and John Eric Sullivan as the new general manager. So what the Dolphins did was they brought over new leadership from Green Bay to help rebuild the Dolphins. Of course, the big storyline, Tua Tagovailoa, he's widely expected to be gone from Miami this offseason. He threw for 20 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, but was benched late in the season. As far as positives for the Dolphins, Devon Achane recorded a career high 1,300 rushing yards and 12 total touchdowns. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry. Another positive for them on offense, Jalen Waddle was only 910 receiving yards this year, 6 touchdowns, but he was a little banged up during the season. And then Jordan Brooks, our linebacker, 183 tackles and 3.5 sacks. He was named to a first-team All-Pro. And as I mentioned to begin here, so the Dolphins have already begun their rebuild. And as of this past week, right, Tyreek Hill, gone. James Daniels, gone. Bradley Chubb, gone. And there's been reports over the past week that they've been shopping Minkah Fitzpatrick in trade talks. So, right, as I mentioned a little earlier, Tua Tagovailoa. So moving on from Tua is going to be historically expensive for this team. Let me repeat, historically expensive. Wait till you see I get into some of these numbers here. So going into the 2026 to 27 season, Tua has a cap hit of $56.3 million, and he is owed $54 million fully guaranteed for next year. Okay? Now, if he's cut before June 1st, the Dolphins would trigger a $99 million dead cap hit, which would actually nearly double the previous NFL record, which was set by Russell Wilson with the Denver Broncos. So $99 million, that's prior to June 1st. Now, post June 1st cut, that would be cap hits of $67 million in 2026 and $31.8 million in 2027. So whatever Miami chooses to do here, likely I would think it's probably going to be a post June 1st cut, as you'd have to eat the $67 million this year. But I mean, right, they're already looking like they're going to be rebuilding. So, money, I don't think will be a big deal for them, at least in this upcoming current season, as they look to turn over the roster. But either way, whatever does happen, at this point, it's really hard to envision Tua on this team going forward. And this is, like I said, this is looking like it's going to be a lengthy rebuild for the Dolphins with the new faces from Green Bay taking over charge here. So let's talk about the free agency situation. So the latest that I'd seen that they currently would have, this was originally, so this was before the Tyreek Hill release and the Chubb and Daniels releases. So they were looking at about $56 million in cap space. Hill's release at least opened up about $23 million. So they're opening up quite an amount of cap room here. That's about $80 million right there that they just opened up just by cutting Tyreek Hill. Some of their key free agents this year. So Kader Kohou, he's a corner, and he was a guy who was coming off a strong 2024 season, but unfortunately, he tore his ACL in training camp. So his status is really completely up in the air for this upcoming, for what the new coaching staff, what the new GM, what they think of him as a player, as relating to their scheme. So Hafley is going to need to decide if Kader Kohou is a guy who could fit his scheme. Basically, his scheme requires corners to play aggressive man-to-man press man coverage. So that's a decision that they'll have to weigh. Another free agent, Liam Eichenberg, he's shown a versatility. He's played multiple positions on the offensive line, but he's had his shares of struggles and inconsistencies. So he might be a guy that they probably look to move on from. And another guy I have here, Willie Gay Jr., he's kind of like a rotational linebacker, but he was a key piece this past year of the linebacking group. He showcased good speed. He has the ability to cover backs out of the backfield and tight ends down the seam. He's got good speed. So, I think maybe they would bring him back to fit in the depth with the linebacking group, put him next to a guy like Jordan Brooks. So let's touch on the coaching philosophy of the Dolphins. So Jeff Hafley, like I said, coming over Green Bay, he's going to be calling the defensive plays. He's planning to move Miami away from like a multiple front and mainly towards a 4-3 base defense. His defense really focuses on single gap penetration. So he wants basically his defensive lineman shooting through a specific gap rather than playing like a read and react defense. So Hafley wasn't a heavy blitzer in Green Bay in the traditional sense. He again, on the last episode, I used a lot of the terms simulated pressures. So right, showing 6 or 7 guys on the line of scrimmage, but you only send 4 and the rest drop back into coverage. So he did a lot of that in Green Bay. He likes a lot of single high safety looks, so like a lot of cover 1, a lot of cover 3 defensive looks. And this basically what this does is this allows an extra defender in the box to stop the run when challenging receivers with press man coverage on the perimeter. That's what Hafley's bringing over defensively to Miami. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, it's pretty interesting here. So Offensively, their new offensive coordinator is Bobby Slowick. You might recall he's the former offensive coordinator in Houston, and he was also on the Miami staff last year in the role of senior passing game coordinator. Now, so with that being said, right, so he was with Mike McDaniel's staff, and Slowick, he is a disciple of like that Shanahan Kubiak coaching tree, similar to Mike McDaniel. So there were reports that Slowick was planning to tailor the offensive scheme away from that approach, which I'm not too like really sure of there. So for instance, so while the Shanahan offense is much more like wide zone, Slowick is preferring a more like inside power zone hybrid, which is what he's calling it. Slowick wants to make the offense more physical, so he says he plans to use more 12 and 13 personnel. So when I say 12, 13 personnel, I mean more multiple tight end sets designed to help a young offensive line, which is what they're expecting to have. So with that being said, color me a little skeptical of Slowick kind of scheming away from the Shanahan Kubiak style to kind of adapting his own style, which really wasn't that great in Houston. So right, and like I said, yeah, the same guy who got run out of Houston just a few years back, when they didn't live up to their billing. Even though CJ Stroud, you could make a case was his best while with Slowick as the offensive coordinator. But it is interesting that even though they push McDaniel out the door, they keep still someone as part of that coaching tree. So let's talk about a few free agent fits here. So, of course, we've already heard the rumors of Malik Willis coming from Green Bay. He has ties to the coaching staff and the front office. Plus, Miami's going to need a new QB when they move on from Tua. So, that's something that could be talked about. Again, though, I don't feel like Malik Willis is going to fit in here with like a total rebuild. I don't know if Miami's going to want to spend the money on Malik Willis this year, while also if they have to, when they're probably going to have to be paying Tua for this year and the following year. I think, though, this could be a good landing spot for a tight end, maybe a guy like David Njoku, maybe a guy like Isaiah Likely. So Slowick's offenses in the past, when he was with Houston, they have featured the tight end position a lot. And Njoku is an elite athlete who could become the primary middle of the field threat for the Dolphins offense. Okay, so we could look at an offense this way with the Dolphins, right? Let's say, yeah, maybe they do sign Malik Willis. So you could have a guy like Malik Willis at quarterback, Devon Achane in the backfield, with Jalen Waddle on the outside perimeter, along with Njoku or Isaiah Likely as the primary threats on the inside. That's actually a pretty solid-looking offense right there, in my opinion. Defensively, so a defensive free agent that could be signed by them, Greg Newsome, right, from Jacksonville, he would fit Haley's defense as he's very good, great speed, very good man coverage skills that Haley likes. He likes the press man coverage, like I said earlier. Another guy they could look at is Nick Cross from the Colts, another great fit too here. He would be Jeff Hafley's center fielder in Miami's new single high looks.
Yeah, so when I look at Miami, the main thing, right, is Tua. You brought up the money situation. I think a lot of what they're going to do in free agency is going to be hinging on how they move on from Tua. There are scenarios in which they can trade Tua and not have to eat as much money and actually save some money. I have to imagine that's what they're going to explore first, right? I have to imagine they're going to try to find a scenario and a place that they can trade Tua where they could save some money against the cap, either pre-June 1st or post-June 1st. If they can't do that, then I do think it's going to be hard for this team to be ultra aggressive. There's a part of me that thinks someone will take a chance on Tua, especially in a trade. You're not going to have to give up much. So, yeah, if they can move him, then yeah, I think they can be aggressive in free agency. I think some of the positions you mentioned are absolutely where they need to focus. This team needs a tight end. I think they need another wide receiver. I love Jalen Waddle this year. I thought he played really well. I think he's getting closer to what people thought he was going to be. And I think that was evident in the fact that they didn't want to trade him at the trade deadline. They were willing to keep him and look at him and Achane as kind of their two. So if you could add another wide receiver or tight end, either or with maybe Malik Willis, I think your offense is looking better. The center Brewster was really good again for them this year, but they need a tackle and they probably need a guard. Like, this line is still not great. So there are a number of areas on the offensive side of the ball where I think they need to get better. And on the defensive side of the ball, you had mentioned some guys. Chop Robinson was good, who was a rookie this year. Brooks, the linebacker, had another solid season. I'd throw Minka Fitzpatrick in there, but I do think they're going to ultimately move on from him. If they move on from Minka, I think, their best corner last year is probably Rasul Douglas, who maybe has a role on this team as like a number 2 corner, but he's a free agent too. So if Rasul Douglas leaves, this is a team that could need like an entire new secondary. So when you use the word rebuild, I really think this team is in, a pretty big rebuild, especially depending on who their quarterback is. They can add some pieces and maybe find themselves being somewhat competitive, but I think this team has a lot of holes, and I don't know what type of money they're going to have in order to help fill those holes in free agency.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they will release a couple more guys coming up. We'll have to see as we get closer to the league year. But yeah, I mean, I can't really even see them. I'm sure Halfley will want to bring in some of his guys from Green Bay.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll probably hear more, but once you talk about the Packers, once we get to them. But I think it just makes sense, at least from a scheme perspective, for him to tap into those ranks from the Packers. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think there will be some constraints here. Honestly, I don't really see them being as too active, at least for the
Yeah.
big names and come free agency. I mean, I think they will check in on Malik Willis and see, but they're just not a win now team in my mind with the state of the roster how it currently
And
looks right now.
And so much of it comes down to like how they move on from Tua. If they trade him, then we're talking about a completely different scenario here,
Right.
in which they're going to save a little bit of money and then maybe they can be a little bit more aggressive. If they're forced to cut this guy, they're going to take a massive, massive hit. There's no way around it. And it sounds like they're moving on from Tua one way or another. So I'm sure they'll explore trade. I'm sure there's a team that looks out there that goes, you know what? I think next year, as I'm looking at his contract now, I think you can. I mean, I say there's a potential out, but you could trade for his contract and then next year cut him and it not be terrible. So I could see that being appealing to a team or two, as long as you don't have to, take on too much of the money. But at the same time, if you're a team that doesn't want to take on any of the money, you might just wait until Miami releases them. It's a similar situation with Kyler
Right.
Murray, and we'll talk about that when we get to Arizona. But so much of what Miami does and how they attack this offseason, I think, is going to depend on Tua and how they handle him. And he's not going to be a guy who, when the league year starts on whatever day it is in 2 weeks, that will have a clear-cut idea of where Miami's going. And that's probably going to be the frustrating thing for Miami fans too. They're going to free up money. They've already cut a number of guys. They freed up the money with Tyreek Hill. They freed it up with Bradley Chubb. They'll probably free up a little bit more with Tua one way or another, but they may have to wait in free agency to go after some of these guys. They may be second tier in free agency because they're going to have to wait to see how exactly they move on from Tua.
Right. Exactly. All right. That was the Dolphins. So what we're gonna do?
And Halfley, another Bergen County guy.
That's right, Mawa, right?
No, Pascat Kills.
Oh, Pascal
Pascat
Hills.
Kills
Oh,
High
okay.
School. Yes, sir.
So we got Miami off the wheel, NFC. So your time to shine, brother. Let's see who we got. Saints. Looks like. Nolens.
All right, the Saints. The Saints are a fun team to look at, man. All right, so the Saints. We'll start with the season summary for how they finished last year. It was really a tale of 2 seasons for the Saints. Kellen Moore took over, and despite starting the season 2-9, they finished the season 4-3, winning 4 of their final 5 games. Part of the reason for the change in success was because of their rookie quarterback, Tyler Shugg. They decided to start him. Let me see if I have that number here, what week it was exactly. They started him in the Tampa game, and he really started from there. And if you look at the Saints and where they were, if they started him earlier in the year, I would be very, very curious to where this team would have finished. They finished 6-11 in a bad NFC South, but they finished 6-11. And as I mentioned, finished the year really, really strong. So the cap situation for the Saints, as it has been the last couple of years, is the Saints are over the cap. They really mortgaged a lot of their kind of future under Sean Payton. It's something he did, and they're still paying the price for it to an extent. So what they can do. The first thing is they could look to extend Chris Olave, right? His name got brought up at the trade deadline. They could trade him as well. I think they're going to look to extend him. If the Saints think that he can be a future number one, and I know he's always a guy who, with New Orleans, he's hot and cold with that fan base. I like him as a wide receiver. I think with Shug, he looked really good, and they can look to extend him and take and help their cap situation that way. Restructure candidates. They can restructure Chase Young, free up around $11 million if they want to do that. They can restructure Carl Granderson. They can free up money that way. Jawan Jennings, their tight end. Justin Reed, their safety. They can fully convert all these guys if they want to, and free up maybe around $25-30 million if they choose to do that. Right now, I think they're about $8 million over the cap. So between that and maybe Olave, they can at least give themselves some money to look to spend in free agency. So a couple players that are kind of on the bubble. The first is Alvin Kamara. He's been with the Saints since 2017. He's on a pretty big contract, and despite having a good season a year prior, his numbers were down across the board this year. He has not played a full season for the Saints since 2022. He'll be 31 at the start of the new year, or at the start of the new NFL season. And there's a world where the Saints look to work something out to keep him, as he's been with New Orleans throughout his entire career. He's beloved by the Saints. They drafted him. They could look to trade him. I do think there's value to him and what he does, especially to a contender. I don't know how many of those guys or how many contenders would want to take him on the contract that he's on right now. Or they could designate him a June 1st cut him, and then save some money that way. They also have Cesar Ruiz, who struggled in 2025, former first rounder, has 2 years left on his deal. I'm sure they're going to look to trade him first. If they can't do that, I have to imagine they'll keep him, but they'll probably float his name similar to Kamara. Hey, can we get some type of draft capital for either one of these guys? And the last is Pete Warner, who's kind of in a very similar role. He's a former second-round pick. He started his career very well, but his role's kind of decreased since Kellen Moore took over. Cutting him isn't really an option, but I'm sure they'll kind of float his name in trade talk. Hey, here's a guy still on a rookie contract. Would you look to maybe somebody will look to take him there? Saints free agents. First one is Alontae Taylor. Spot Track has him valued at $10 million. Taylor has been solid for New Orleans. He's been good in pass coverage and serviceable against the run. He can play inside or outside. I'm sure New Orleans would love to keep him. I don't know if they're going to be able to. We just talked about it. They're $8, $9, $10 million over the cap. The moves that they can make can probably get them under the cap and free up another $25 to $30 million. I don't know if they can afford to pay someone like Alontae Taylor $10 million a year. Maybe they can if they backload the contract. It'd be a very Saints thing to do, but my guess is he hits the open market and he has a chance to make probably more than what he's valued at there. The next is Demario Davis. Davis had another outstanding season for the Saints. Spot Track has him valued at $9.5 million. I'm sure the Saints would love to keep him. I think it's going to be really, really difficult to retain him, depending on how much money he's looking to get. Again, he's been a guy who's been in New Orleans forever. He's 37 years old. I'm curious if maybe him and the Saints, and we'll talk about Cam Jordan being in a very similar spot, if maybe they just look to work something out to keep the vets there and guys who have been with this football team for a long time. But if he wants to hit the open market and play for a contender, New Orleans won't be able to keep him. Luke Fortner, their center, had a really good season in all phases as a pass blocker and a run blocker. Again, it's going to come down to price. Like most free agents with New Orleans, I think he's one they'll look to keep. Again, like when you look at Davis or Cam Jordan, those guys are a bit older. I do wonder if this is the year where the Saints look to kind of get younger. Fortner kind of fits in the middle there. He's 27 years old. So I think of all their free agents, he's one they look to keep. Cameron Jordan's the next guy, 36, like Davis. Jordan is still playing at a really high level. If he wants to stay in New Orleans, I'm sure him in New Orleans will make something work. If he's looking to get a good final payday or really play for a contender, I'm sure New Orleans will honor that he'll hit free agency and he'll have a chance to end up on a contender with the way he played last year. And then the final two are Dylan Radsness, who's their guard, Taysom Hill, who's kind of been the do-it-all guy. Radsness played okay when called upon this season. If he's willing to come back for the Saints, I think they do it. But again, I think they're looking to get younger and improve in the interior. And Taysom Hill is like kind of a part of this core that I've just talked about. Kamara, Davis, Jordan, Taysom Hill. If they want to get younger, they're going to let Taysom Hill go. If Hill wants to stay, I'm sure he won't cost that much money. I don't even know how you value him. Spotrac has him valued at $1.2 million. I don't even know where he fits. He does so many different things, but he's kind of like grown into like a Saint legend in a way. He hasn't played a full season since 23. His production is down in whatever way you slice it. So, again, if he wants to stay, I'm sure the Saints would love to keep him. If he's looking to go elsewhere and compete, I'm sure the Saints will allow him to do that. So my needs for the Saints. The left guard has been a glaring need for this team, and this could be the year that they finally look to solidify that spot. Eric McCoy has been serviceable at center, but he's missed 20 games the past 2 years. I think there's a world where the Saints find a way to keep Fortner, and they can have McCoy and Fortner maybe look to kick one of those guys to guard. But this team needs to get better in the interior. It's kind of like a revolving door there. Wide receiver is another spot. Olave's solid. I'm sure you'll give me your thoughts in a second. I don't know if he's a true number one. I don't know where they pick, if they'll be able to get a true number one. But this is a team that needs to look at a wide receiver. Their money situation isn't going to be the best, but if they can go out there and add another body to help Chris Olave, their number 2 wide receiver this year was Devon Bell, who played well for them, but he's not a number 2 consistently in this league. So wide receivers a spot I'd look for them to add. Even if Kamara stays on this football team, they need to get younger at running back. They need to find somebody who's more explosive, whether just to carry the ball or to catch out of the backfield. When you look at this team and where they finished in their rushing yards, they gave a lot of running backs a chance, and none of them really stepped up. And Edge is very similar to everything we've mentioned. Cameron Jordan, Chase Young, they both had 10 sacks this year. Those are 2 older guys. If Cam Jordan leaves and hits free agency, Edge would probably be my number 1 target next to guard or center, something in the interior this year. Get younger in both those positions. And again, for the Saints this year, they finished the year really well. I think they have the quarterback for the future. Now it's a matter of building around him, giving him some options on offense, solidifying that offensive line. And then on the defensive side of the football, they had a decent defense this year. Now let's add an edge rusher who can get after the quarterback.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like every year I feel like we always hear the Saints got to play basically cap gymnastics here to get like compliant for the league here, and a lot of it has to do with when Sean Payton was there, with the amount of money that was being moved around and over a couple of years when he was there. So I mean, I can't agree with you anymore. I think definitely the plan should be, if you feel like Tyler Shuck's going to be your guy, you definitely got to surround him with more talent. And I gotta say, like the way the Saints did finish last year, got to give Kellen Moore and that staff a lot of credit. Yep. I mean, as we went through, I mean, this is a team that doesn't really have the skill position talent. I mean, right? Alvin Kamara is still hanging around. He's still good, but he is getting up there in age. And yeah, you mentioned Chris Olave, who's right. He's had his share really of like concussion problems over the past couple of years. It's really limited his playing time. But yeah, building around Tyler Shuck, I think, has got to be main priority right now. I think a big-bodied X receiver to pair with Chris Olave, maybe somebody who can go up there and win 50-50 balls, maybe a guy like Mike Evans. I don't know if he would go to a division rival from Tampa, but and yeah, they need a long-term successor at the running back position too. Maybe they hit that in the draft, right? What pick do the Saints have? They're
I was just Googling that.
They can get like a Jeremiah Love if they wanted to splurge there. They absolutely could. You can put Jeremiah Love with Alvin Kamara for a year and, phase out Kamara. 8th. Okay. So yeah, he probably might be on the board at that point. So, but looking at their, what they're trying to do, yeah, definitely my top needs for the wide receiver and running back building around Tyler Shuck. I also have interior offensive line here, especially Luke Fortson, as you mentioned, had a fantastic year last year. Got to limit the pressure on Tyler Shuck. he was under pressure a lot from the interior side. I saw some stats about that. So they definitely need to improve the blocking on the interior part of the line of
And
scrimmage for him.
and
And
they're two.
then
Sorry, go.
no, and then I was going to say too, yeah. So edge rusher, like as you mentioned, Cameron Jordan, getting up there in age. Demario Davis, another older guy in the linebacking core. They got to start trying to build around future. Start looking to the future of building up that defense.
And they have two young tackles at guards. Their first round picks the last 2 years have been Calvin Banks and Fanoa, the tackle last year, or Fagawa, the tackle last year. So if you look at the line, and if they keep Fortner and Eric McCoy can come back healthy, you like your two tackles. They're young. The two can play on the interior. If they can add a guard and a weapon or two, this offense can be probably carry them a little bit this year. For a defense that was serviceable last year, they're in a division that isn't great. So again, money will be interesting. They're going to have to build through the draft. They pick 8 this year. I'm curious if a Cardinal Tate drops there. Could he be a guy? Could they like Jordan Tyson more than I particularly like him? Could he do something next to Olave? He'll be an interesting name. But when you look at the core of this roster, there is a lot that you like there, especially if you really like the quarterback.
Absolutely. And a couple of guys who I have, what I'm thinking that they could do. So for some free agency fits, especially on the interior of the offensive line, if they can't re-sign the center, Tevin Jenkins is a guard, really athletic guy who fits more system. He could be an upside addition for their power run that they do. Dalton Reiser, another guard. He's more of a veteran, but he is a good pass blocking specialist. He might be able to be had on a cap friendly deal. As far as receivers go, I mentioned Mike Evans a little earlier. I also have Romeo Doubs here, who's expected to be released from the Packers.
Yep.
He could be a good secondary option in the passing game to Olave, not necessarily a number one, but another guy that could go out there and get open for Tyler Shuck. And then defensively, Caleb Von Chason's a guy from the Patriots. He could be a cheaper option that they go with there for the Saints, since of course their cap situation is not the best. All right, so that was the Saints. So we're going to move on to our next team, and we're going to go to the AFC. Let me just take the Saints off the wheel here. All right, AFC. Here we go. Let's see. Give me like an AFC North team. We haven't spoken about any of these teams yet, I don't think.
Yeah, I was going to say you haven't done the North yet.
Oh, here we go. Raiders. I think this actually closes out the AFC West here, too. Right, last week I spoke of all those teams besides the Raiders. Let's see. Las Vegas Raiders, number 1 pick in the draft. All right, so the Las Vegas Raiders. So, talk about 2025, right? So last season, the Raiders, right, they went through one of the most frustrating seasons in their franchise history. So they finished 3-14. It's actually their worst season since 2006. And Pete Carroll was the head coach. He's let go after 1 year. He was fired on January 6th. Offensive coordinator Chip Kelly didn't make it through the season himself, and the team's trade of Geno Smith was really an unmitigated disaster as the Raiders finished dead last in points scored and total yards. So late in the season, too, if you might recall, the team drew a lot of criticism for placing players like Brock Bowers and Max Crosby on injured reserve. Those moves were viewed as openly tanking in an effort to secure the number 1 pick in the draft, which they did end up doing. You be the judge yourself if you thought that they were doing that. It got to the point in which sources were reporting that Max Crosby wants out of Vegas. And as you may have heard recently, the Raiders, and we touched on it a little bit in last week's show, that the Raiders want 2 first-round picks and a player to pry away Max Crosby. So the positives for this team this season was Crosby did accumulate 10 sacks, a double-digit sack season for him. Trey Tucker was their leader in receiving yards. He had 696 receiving yards last year. Aston Genty, their rookie from last year, he actually had over 1,300 yards rushing and receiving with 10 total touchdowns. So a good year for the rookie. So the Raiders here going into this upcoming season, they decide to overhaul their coaching staff with minority owner Tom Brady playing a large role during the coaching search, which, yeah, I'm just going to say it, my opinion, it's conflict of interest, being as involved in the ownership of a team while, doing your TV commentary job for Fox, but that's just me. So they hire Clint Kubiak, who is the offensive coordinator from Seattle, fresh off the Super Bowl win. The new offensive coordinator is Andrew Janaka, who comes over with Kubiak from Seattle. He was the quarterback coach there. The new defensive coordinator is Rob Leonard, who served as the defensive line coach and run game coordinator with the Raiders last season. So he's familiar already with the personnel in-house. And he will inherit a defense that finished 25th in scoring this past season. So the Raiders enter this offseason with about $90 million in cap space, which would actually be the second most in the NFL. So it's looking like, though, the Raiders want to clear out the current roster to build around, the projected number one pick, Fernando Mendoza, which we're all expecting him to be. So they have 24 players set to hit free agency, and there was a report that they will be releasing Geno Smith ahead of the new league year. So Smith's salary for next season was set to become fully guaranteed on the third day of the new league year if he was on the team, if he's not traded or released, so he won't be on the team. So the Raiders don't have to guarantee his salary. So some of their key free agents. So at guard, they have Dylan Parham. He could be a consistent starter, and he actually fits the Kubiak zone, outside zone running scheme. The Raiders ranked dead last in the league in rushing last season. So Dylan Parham, right? He's a solid player. I think he fits the scheme. He's probably a guy they'll want to keep around. Eric Stokes at cornerback, he started 16 games last season, and actually he allowed a team low 76.9 passer rating. He actually ranked 18th among corners with a 73.6 PFF grade. He recorded 53 tackles and had 5 passes defensed. I'll give a shout out here. Daniel Carlson, their kicker, converted 22 of 27 field goals and 21 of 22 extra points. He's been with the team for 8 seasons now, and he served as a solid kicker over his career with them. So, maybe they choose to bring him back on maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. And then, of course, the big talking point, as we mentioned a lot lately as we do this free agency feature, Max Crosby, right? He's been with the Raiders for 7 seasons. He's accumulated about 70 sacks, over 400 tackles in his career. He's only played in 1 playoff game in those 7 seasons, and it appears that his time could be potentially over. I know that Kubiak came out and said he expects Crosby to be a part of the team, but the Raiders are apparently listening to offers. His contract's not so bad if it's traded. So his contract with the Raiders, it currently carries a $35 million cap hit. If the Raiders trade him prior to June 1st, they would only trigger $5 million in dead cap while clearing over $30 million in cap space. So not so bad on them. And a team trading for him would take on a cap hit of $30 million for the upcoming season. Again, $30 million is not so bad. NFL teams, they can make it work. So let's touch on their coaching right now. So Clint Kubiak coming over from Seattle, another guy who's part of the Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak coaching tree, who runs a high-powered variation of the West Coast offense. So, the outside zone run is the engine of the entire offense. So Kubiak's going to be relying on athletic offensive linemen to move laterally. So laterally as in sideline to sideline for the running game to operate successfully. This forces the defense to run with the linemen and basically creates cutback lanes for a guy like Ashton Genty, who could potentially exploit those into big gains. So play action is going to be a big staple of the offense, which will help trigger linebackers towards the line of scrimmage and opening up more windows for quarterbacks in the passing game to complete passes. So you also should expect to see a lot of bootlegs and rollouts. Kubiak's going to want to move the quarterback outside the pocket to simplify the reads, which would make life easy, for a young QB, such as Fernando Mendoza. So expect to see a lot of 12 and 21 personnel, so multiple tight ends, probably a fullback, and a lot of motion pre-snap. Now, defensively, so Rob Leonard, so the research I did on him, so he's been around the league for a lot over the past decade. He spent a lot of time on Brian Flores' staff in Miami and some time with Mike McDonald in Baltimore. So he's mainly worked as a defensive line coach. So I would expect from him, kind of a lot of what we see nowadays, a lot of simulated pressures, as I talked about that with Miami earlier. showing 6 or 7 guys at the line of scrimmage, only rushing 4, with the other 2 or 3 dropping back into coverage to try to force quarterbacks into incorrect decisions. So expect to see a lot of multiple fronts, heavy rotations. His 2024 unit had 18 different players record a sack. So a lot of rotation on that defensive line. The Raiders defense last season actually held opponents to the 4th lowest yards per rush in the NFL. So I would still expect the rush defense to continue to serve as a major priority, and it's probably one of the things that they do best on the team. So free agency fits here. Right, this is where the big fish could end up. I made my prediction last week that Tyler Linderbaum would be a Charger, but the Raiders should be in the mix too. He's the premier free agent. He has the elite lateral mobility that would be ideal for a center and anchor for the Raiders offensive line, especially helpful for a rookie quarterback. So, like I said, the Raiders have the money to bring him in. If he reaches the open market, it's going to be interesting, as I really believe the Raiders are going to be battling the Chargers, their division rival, to sign him. So outside of him, another guy from the Chargers, I talked about a little last week about him, Zion Johnson on the Chargers. He would be a good fit here. Another guy that I have on their offensive line, Braden Smith from the Colts. They really need to get some offensive linemen in here to protect Mendoza and fit the outside run zone that Kubiak wants to install. Receiver-wise, don't be surprised if they look at Rashid Shaheed, who was in Seattle with Kubiak. He would make a lot of sense here. He was with Kubiak in Seattle, and Kubiak, when he was the OC in New Orleans, he coached him there as well. Defensively, I look at a guy like Boye Mafe, another guy from Seattle, recorded 40 tackles and 6 sacks in 15 games this past season. He actually has a very high win rate going up against offensive linemen, and he could be a guy that potentially replaces Max Crosby if they choose to trade him. And then for their secondary here, I don't think he's going to reach the market, but I have Jaquan Brisker here from the Bears. He would be another safety that fits their scheme, as Rob Leonard likes guys who, quote unquote, play with violence, which we know Jaquan Brisker does from his days with the Bears. So, Raiders, I think, will be a team that are very active in free agency, trying to bring guys in, especially try to build up that offensive line to get it ready for Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah, they have to be active in free agency. This roster's awful. Like,
Mhm.
there's no sugarcoating it. There's no trying to, it's bad. When you just pull up their depth chart and you look at it, it's bad. They have some great young pieces, right? Like, Genty's awesome. Brock Bowers is awesome. Colton Miller, left tackle, is good. And Max Crosby's really good. Like, Max Crosby's one of, the top edge rushers. I was going to say, if not the best, but Myles Garrett exists. But he's in the top tier of defensive end in the NFL. The rest of this roster is bad. So they have a lot of money. They have holes. This team needs to spend money. This offseason, they're going to have to overpay for guys, unfortunately. They need to figure out what's happening with Jackson Powers Johnson, which is one of their higher draft picks recently. Like, is he a guard? Is he a center? Is Dylan Parham coming back? If you could have Parham, Jackson, Powers Johnson, and then add Tyler Linderbaum with Colton Miller, that's a start. But when I look at what this team needs on offense at wide receiver, and I look at the wide receivers available, this screams like a team that's going to take a chance on a Tyreek Hill when they don't need him. I don't know what they do with wide receiver. I know George Pickens' name is thrown around out there. They probably should be a team that's aggressively calling Dallas and being like, would you take a second and another pick for George Pickens? Because when I look at the rest of the wide receivers, none of them move me.
Yeah.
None of them are like, hey, this is what this football team needs. When you look at the rest of this roster, if you could add Pickens and Rashid Shaheed, that's a great combo then. But if we're talking about Rashid Shaheed or Mike Evans or Deebo Samuel or guys like that, Jawan Jennings, let's overpay for Jawan Jennings. None of that moves me for this football team. If I were them, I would just go all in for Pickens and just see if you can pry him away from Dallas. Maybe you can't, but it can't hurt to at least pick up the phone and call. And you mentioned it on defense. I think even with Max Crosby, this team still needs help on the edge. And they need help in the secondary. And they're a team that with some of these guys at safety and corner, some of the names you see at the upper price. They should be in if Cameron Curl hits free agency or if Brian Cook hits free agency. They should be in for either one of those guys. At corner, they should be involved for Jalen Watson or Jamel Dean or even Alontae Taylor. This team needs a lot of help, and adding Mendoza is going to be great. And if they can shore up the line around them, maybe they'll at least be exciting to watch. But when you looked at this roster last year, they were the worst roster in football. There's going to need to be a level of patience with this, especially Mendoza. And yeah, they're going to have to go out there in free agency, and they're going to have to spend money and probably overpay for some guys, but they need to because this roster's bare bones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. And coming back to receiver, I think George Pickens would make a lot of sense for this team. I mean, they could also, I'm sure we'll get to them later when we talk Eagles and 49ers, A.J. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, could those be potential landing spots for one of those guys to bring them in as the number one wide receiver, work with Fernando Mendoza? They're already pretty set at running back with Ashton Genty. Trey Tucker's there. He could operate more of like as a number two. Maybe he's not even a number two. He may even be a number three. But yeah, definitely more talent needs to be added here to this roster. And then for their sake, I mean, if they... I don't know if I can give a prediction dude, I don't know if I really don't know if Crosby's going to be traded or not. Man, I think if I was to bet on it today, I would probably say he would be, and they would get those 2 picks that they can use. Maybe a pick this year, maybe a pick next year for that, what's supposed to be studded 2027 draft. But yeah, either way, they need to, defensively, they need to add more talent either way. And then maybe, like you said, maybe at least offensively, they could be a fun team to watch next year with the rookie quarterback. Maybe if they can get a stud wide receiver in there around a solid offensive line through free agency, maybe Raider fans will be a little more passive then, though. I get it. It's hard. It's got to be hard to be patient at this point with this team from how we've seen them operate over the past, decade really or so.
I think patience helps when you have a young quarterback, right? If Mendoza comes in and he's good next year, I think it's fine to be patient because there's something to look forward to. To your point, A.J. Brown, absolutely. This is a team that could probably take him on and that money and make it work somehow. We'll talk about him when we get to the Eagles, but that's a really good shout. And I could see that happening because I don't think A.J. Brown will cost you, maybe he costs you a second, but if the things with the Eagles are as bad as it seems, and Nick Sirianni came out at the Senior Bowl, or excuse me, the Combine this week, and he was kind of like, we don't know what's going to happen with A.J. Brown, which I thought was really telling. And to your point with Crosby, I would take that bet because I don't think he's going to get traded. I think the Raiders are steadfast on saying we want 2 first-round picks. I just don't know how many teams out there are going to be willing to trade 2 first-round picks for Max Crosby. I'm sure there are teams out there, and maybe I'll be wrong like I was wrong with Javonte Williams and the Cowboys a week ago. But right now I look at it and go, I don't know how many teams feel they're an edge rusher away, and to give up 2 first-round picks for this guy is a lot. So I would probably take that bet with you that I think he stays. And yeah, I think A.J. Brown or even Brandon Ayuk could be options. George Pickens as well at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that was the Raiders. So we're going to go back to the NFC part of the wheel. So let's say, take the Raiders out. The AFC West is completed. Our first division
AFC
we
West
finished.
knocked out.
We still got the whole NFC West and the whole AFC North. I know that. See, let's go. A little laggy here. Oh, okay. We got the Seahawks.
All right, well, Seahawks. They'll be fun. What a fun team to talk about there. All right, where are
oh man, we didn't even get the
Seahawks?
confetti for that one. That was really laggy that time.
Let me get this up, and then we will talk about. I mean, well, we can start as I'm even typing here. Yeah, the Seattle Seahawks did what many thought they couldn't. They won the Super Bowl. They were plus 6,000 odds to win the Super Bowl before the season. The Seahawks found a way with their unbelievable defense and steady offense. They have a big offseason now with several big decisions to be made and several big contributors potentially hitting free agency. So where are the Seahawks at? They have money to spend. They have $62 million or around there. They're under the cap. Extension candidates. Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's doing extension. He's likely to reset the market with whatever extension he gets. I'm guessing, the talk will be Jackson Smith-Njigba and Puka Nacua. Who gets extended first to kind of help the other one get the leverage? He'll get paid. He's claimed he's not really worried about it, which kind of makes me think it may not happen this offseason. But that's a player that will get extended, and he's going to get a nice price tag. Devin Witherspoon is the other one. He's a top corner in this game right now. He's going to get a massive contract when he and the Seahawks sit down. Could be this summer, could be next summer. Restructure candidates. Again, the Seahawks don't necessarily need to restructure money, but if they want to, they can free $20 million up by restructuring Sam Darnold's contract. What to do with guys? Edge. Uchenna Nwosu had 7 sacks, but he's going into a contract year. He carries a $12 million cap hit. His role kind of decreased a little bit as the year went on, and this is a team that is not hurting for edge rushers. They still have DeMarcus Lawrence. They have Derek Hall. They have Leonard Williams. They have Bo Mafi. They have plenty of guys who can get to the quarterback. So do they look to trade him, move on from that $12 million cap hit, free some money up there? The next is Cooper Kupp, and it's not really a what will they do with guy, it's what will he do. Will he retire? He's 32 years old. He has 2 years left on his deal. He hasn't made any intention that he's thinking of retiring, but he has just won a Super Bowl. So is he a player that looks at it and goes, I've accomplished all I want to accomplish. I've done it in Los Angeles with the Rams. I did it in Seattle with the Seahawks. Let me start the next stage of my life. Again, he hasn't given any indication that he's thinking of doing that, but he could be a guy that if he retires, he'll free some money up for the Seahawks. They're free agents. Kobe Bryant, the safety, played safety this season, and he played really well. They have Julian Love under contract until 2028, which is a factor for Bryant, who I think has played corner and safety for the Seahawks. He played safety this season for them. So again, Spotrac has him valued at $14 million. The Seahawks have money, and I think they're going to look to retain a guy like Bryant. But with Love under contract to 2028, I wouldn't be shocked if they look at him and go, you know what? We paid Julian Love decent money to play safety for us. We're not looking to carry 2 guys on a big cap hit. Maybe they let Kobe Bryant walk and play Julian Love. Rashid Shaheed, who's an absolutely massive part to their Super Bowl win. They traded for him, but he's not an incredibly efficient wide receiver. He has home run ability and big play ability, and he was a game changer for this team in special teams. He has a value of $14 million according to Spotrac. Again, if I had to guess, I think he hits free agency, and then maybe the Seahawks double back on him and bring him back if they hear of a number that works for them. The next is Bo Mafe. He's valued at $12 million. I think they let him walk. He's had a good career for them, but at that price, with DeMarcus Lawrence coming back and some of the other guys they have, I have to imagine they let him test the market. Josh Jobe played really well for them on a 1-year deal. He's valued at $9 million, but he kind of fits what they do really, really well. I think they'd look to retain him regardless of price. I think he's going to be one of the guys with the next 2 guys I talk about that they look to keep and keep some similarity and some familiarity on that or in that secondary. The next is the big one, and that's Kenneth Walker. He's valued at $9 million. He's an interesting one. He was a Super Bowl MVP for this team and maybe was the second most important player in this offense during the playoffs. People forget they play Zach Charbonnet a lot, and this is the max that Walker's value may never be. John Schneider usually doesn't sign running backs on long-term deals. Is Walker any different? Again, they have Zach Charbonnet. His injury may play a factor, but maybe the Seahawks look at it and go, we'll draft another guy in the second round. We'll draft one of these running backs, whether it's a Mike Washington from Arkansas, somebody like that, and pair him up with Charbonnet and not have to pay Walker. I think right now they want to keep Walker, and they have the money to do it. So I would look for him to try to stay in Seattle, and they'll run that running back duo back. The last main free agent I see is Tyreek Woolen. Again, has kind of been a fixture. He was probably the 3rd corner on this team when you look at who they had with Witherspoon. Mwari played a little bit of corner. Kobe Bryant played a little bit of corner. They had Josh Jobe who played the slot. I think they're going to look to keep him. They're going to want to keep that secondary intact with Jobe and Woolen. They re-sign Witherspoon. And then they if they don't want to keep Bryant, they have Mwari with Julian Love. And I think that's a really solid secondary to run back next year. So this team's needs: shocker, it's not many when you look at this team. I think a lot of their needs come down to what they retain and what they don't retain. I think this team needs a guard regardless, just to shore up the interior. They have Anthony Bradford, they have Greg Zabel. Both were good guards this year, but if we're talking about a Super Bowl team that's looking for somewhere to upgrade, I'd say guard. I think this team could look to add another wide receiver if Rashid Shaheed leaves, another guy that can play in the slot. If Cooper Kupp retires, then we're talking about a team that is looking to add a number 2 wide receiver, and they may be a player in free agency. If they keep Cooper Kupp, then it's just looking for a guy to fill in the slot. And again, if Kenneth Walker goes, they're going to look to add a running back. If Woolen or Job looked at free agency, I think they looked to add a slot corner. If this team signs most of the guys I think they're going to resign, then it's just a matter of adding talent on top of talent and looking to maybe find guys to push some guys they already have in this football team.
What do we think of, you think Kenneth Walker, could he be a franchise tag guy? You think the Seattle would do that?
Yeah, do we know what the number is for franchise tag on a running back?
I want to say it's like, I thought I saw it's expected to be between like 12 and 14 million or something like that. And I know that, I think the transition tag was like 10 or 11, I want to say.
So again, right now I think it's like $14 million.
Mm-hmm.
For a year, they definitely could do it.
Mm-hmm.
John Schneider doesn't like to pay running backs big money. He's let guys walk before, and I think they'd look to sign Walker to a long-term deal before they franchise him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I agree. I think that's definitely the best way to go business
And
there. And if you get to desperate times and you feel like you're not going to get there, then of course you can just slap the franchise tag on Walker and kind of lock him in for next year. Maybe you sell him on the market. You see, maybe you can get something and maybe draft a guy this upcoming year, pair him with Charbonnet when he comes back. But yeah, to echo what you're saying about the Seahawks, yeah, I definitely agree. You know, the secondary, they got some decisions they got to make there. And I wrote right here, I agree. Josh Jobe, I think, would be a guy I'd look to come back. I think Tariq Woolen's probably gone. Kobe Bryant, I think, is most likely gone too. They have a lot of cap space. So, you know, they're not going to, but again, they're not going to pay all these guys. I mean, maybe they re-sign one of those 3 and maybe they look to draft one and maybe like the second or third round or something like that. But yeah, the way that secondary looks with, you know, Witherspoon, Julian Love, I mean, that's a rock solid secondary that they've got going into next year. And yeah, I also had on offense here really wide receiver and right guard Cooper Kupp. He's 33 years old now. He could even be, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a cap casualty here. I think he's got a pretty high cap number that he's carrying. They signed him to a pretty healthy contract last offseason. Rashid Shaheed, as I mentioned, him as a possible free agent target for the Raiders. Yeah, he's a free agent. And so, you know, I think the Seattle definitely needs to find a long-term option here for who they want to pair with JSN. That's going to be help being led by Sam Darnold next year in that offense. And yeah, the weak link on the offensive line I had as right guard. Anthony Bradford's a guy who's kind of struggled. I think he actually led the team last year in quick pressures. So, it's probably a spot that's definitely worth upgrading. And so where could they potentially upgrade, right? If they're looking to spend money, I don't have the exact number. Tom, do you know how much cap space that they have going into the year? Because I mean, if I'm them, I'm really looking to I might even make a big splash at wide receiver if I can. I mean, I know, right? You were just talking about them needing to pay JSN, or at least start thinking about starting to pay JSN. But really, right, we know the big fish in free agency, Alec Pierce. I don't know if he's going to hit the market, but he's a guy who can take Shaheed's speed as their guy, that vertical threat who can, beat the defense over the top. They could also look to the Colts. Maybe there's been talk the Colts might end up releasing Michael Pittman. He could be, that big body possession receiver that they currently lack. So he's a guy that could fit in really well too. And then, of course, if they wanted to spend any money to upgrade, from losing any of those corners, I don't think they will. But you could look at a guy like Jalen Watson. You can look at a guy like Alante Taylor or Jamel Dean potentially. But yeah, I would say overall though, that offense, keep trying to improve it. Give Sam Darnold another weapon, especially if Cooper Kupp decides to say, you know what, peace out, I'm out, guys. 2 Super Bowls, I'm good.
Yeah, so Kupp's number is $17 million. And again, to your point,
Mm-hmm.
they're around $60 million in terms
Yeah.
of caps, like money to spend. So they don't really have to make any moves. This is not a team that traditionally spends big in free agency. They're just not. They draft really well. When you look at this team and you look at their cap situation, they spent big on Sam Darnold last year. And when I say big, it's funny, right? $37 million cap hit on a quarterback. If that's big, most teams would take that tomorrow. Then the next big guy is Leonard Williams, a guy they traded for. Most of these guys they draft or they trade for or they sign on good deals. So yeah, they could splash big if they want in free agency. I don't think they're going to. I think even if a guy like Josh Jobe, who played really well, I think they're going to be patient and they'll sign a guy that they think fits their team on a contract that fits where they're at. They're going to make sure that they pay their own. And Witherspoon and JSN are two of the best at their position in football. So they'll get those two sorted out. And then I think if Cooper Kupp retires, then I think it'd get interesting. It'd get interesting. Michael Pittman's actually a really interesting guy to put into this football team. I think he'd fit perfect if he does get released. But yeah, if Cooper Kupp stays, then I think we're looking at, hey, let's just find a guy who can play in the slot, very similar to Rashid Shaheed. And again, if it doesn't work out, they'll sign a guy on a lower deal, probably in that third tier free agency. If it doesn't work out, this will be a team next year that is aggressive at the trade deadline again, because they know how to operate in that type of space. You saw it this year with Rashid Shaheed.
All right, good rundown on Seattle. So we'll go back to the wheel. Seattle comes off. We'll go to the AFC. All right, here we go. Let's see if the wheel works this time. Kind of laggy last time. Oh, here we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, man, we're not going to again, but we got the Titans here. Tennessee. All right, luckily S and T are right next to each other. I got my notes here real quick on the Tennessee Titans. Yeah. Tennessee Titans. So Titans go 3-14 this past season, finishing last in the AFC South for the third consecutive season. Right. And the expectation, I should say, it wasn't as big a surprise. I don't think the expectation going into last season for them is it was going to be a rebuilding year. They're breaking in a new rookie quarterback in Cam Ward. They did a reset to their roster at a lot of different positions, but they didn't expect though. I mean, right. They didn't expect a great year, but it definitely went a lot poorer than expected, as Cam Ward really struggled at times, and the team really struggled for consistency all during the season. So much so that consistency was so bad that Brian Callahan, the coach, was fired in October after a 1-5 start. Mike McCoy took over as the interim coach, and they went 2-9 for the rest of the season. So offensively, the Titans finished near the bottom in really almost every major category: points per game, total yards per game, passing yards per, rushing yards per, and sacks allowed. That's pretty disastrous offense. They were a disaster under Callahan. But when McCoy took over, they were much more competitive in games. Cam Ward, right, first overall pick in last year's draft, he did struggle. He showed flashes at times. He finished with 3,100 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He was the most pressured quarterback in the league last season, though. Right, so and this is a Tennessee team that's invested a lot into their offensive line over the past years. Peter Skoronski, who was another former first-round pick, he was not considered the issue, as he really emerged as an elite talent on that offensive line last year. He was actually PFF's number 2 ranked guard in pass blocking. So he had a good year. It was just the guys around him that just didn't hold up their weight. Tony Pollard led the team in rushing. He had a 1,000-yard season. Their leading receiver was Chiga Okonkwo, the tight end. He led them in receiving with only 560 yards. Calvin Ridley suffered a season-ending injury during last year, so Okonkwo was really lied upon more than people were expecting, as were some of the other rookies on the team, like Eligio Manor and Jameer Deke. They also contributed as well. So the defense ranked on the lower end of most statistical categories too, but one of the main reasons was due to a struggling offense. The defense was on the field like most of the time. The defense was led by Jeffrey Simmons, who had a great year. He had 11 sacks and 64 quarterback pressures. He won first team All-Pro. He was awarded that honor, and he even caught a 1-yard touchdown pass on the year. Cedric Gray was a rookie linebacker. He led the team with 126 tackles. He showed some pretty good sideline to sideline range. The secondary, though, really struggled with consistency, specifically L'Jarius Sneed. They finished 30th in defensive passing DVOA. T'Vondre Sweat, the massive defensive tackle, had a solid season. He was credited for helping the Titans to a 21st ranked pass rush defense, which wasn't so bad for them, all things considered. Of course, we're recording this on what's today, Thursday, the 26th. You may have just heard there was a first official trade. T'Vondre Sweat traded from the Titans to the New York Jets for Jermaine Johnson straight up. So Sweat off the team, and in comes Jermaine Johnson as the Titans' first offseason move of the year. So let's talk about the Titans free agency, how they're currently looking going into the new league year. So the Titans are projected actually to have the most salary cap space in the NFL. They're well over the 80 to 90 million mark in cap space this offseason, right? The entire coaching staff is out in Tennessee. They bring in former Jets head coach Robert Saleh and former Giants head coach as the new offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll. He'll be working specifically with Cam Ward. So you got both. I'll just say both failed New York head coaches teaming up to take over the Titans. So really their big free agent is Chig Okonkwo, who I mentioned, the tight end. He's expected to be a high priority to re-sign. I think it's tough to give him the franchise tag, since the tag for tight ends is projected to be about $16 million. And for him, at least at this stage in his career, the value is just not that high there for that number. Plus, Brian Daboll might prefer, maybe a bigger slot player to fill the type of role that Okonkwo had last season. Another guy, a guy on their offensive line, Kevin Zeitler, he's a veteran player who was, right, he was part of a struggling line last season. I would expect him to walk in free agency, plus he's getting up there in age. Defensively, a couple of guys. So Arden Key, he's on the edge. He played fine as a rotational pass rusher last season. He might be brought back for defensive depth as, Saleh and his scheme, they really like to rotate the defensive linemen in and out. And another guy here is Sebastian Joseph Day, another rotational piece on the D-line. He could potentially fit Saleh's defensive scheme and is a pretty good run stopper. So let's talk more about the coaching philosophy. So with Robert Saleh, new head coach, and he actually came out and said he's planning to call the plays on defense this season. So it's actually different. He didn't do that with the Jets. And if you might recall, under the Jets, the defense was never really the issue. So Saleh changing up his approach here for the Titans. He'll be calling the defense. He's bringing Gus Bradley along with him to be the defensive coordinator. You might recall they worked together when Bradley was the head coach in Jacksonville. They were also together when Bradley was the DC in Seattle for some of those really good Seattle defenses under Pete Carroll. So they're going to transition the defense. The Titans defense last year played a lot of 3-4. Saleh plays the 4-3 base defense. Typically, it's not even really a 4-3. It's more like a 4-2-5. They play like a big nickel. He likes to have the extra defensive back on the field. And that 4-3 base, or the 4-2-5 base, utilizes a wide 9 attack. So when we say wide 9, we talk about edge rushers lining up far outside the tackles, even the tight ends, basically to create better pass rush angles for your defensive linemen to work. Of course, that leaves you susceptible, though, sometimes to the running game. So this scheme, it really relies on the front four to generate pressure without needing to blitz heavily. So Saleh wants his defensive linemen to shoot gaps rather than having them two gaps. So not holding back to clog up the run game or clog up space or anything like that. And I actually think that having Simmons and Sweat on the interior, well, they don't have Sweat anymore, but I thought at the time it would kind of be like an ideal pairing, as Simmons could be the penetrator and Sweat could be the anchor, the guy that takes on the blocks. So like I said, there's going to be a heavy defensive line rotation here. Saleh's linemen rarely even played 80% of the snaps with the Jets. So on the back end, the coverage is a typical cover 3 look with some cover 4 mixed in, and he likes to use a lot of disguises in his coverage. It could be possible that outside of the cover 3 and cover 4, sometimes he actually did, in certain situations, he liked to play man-to-man defense on third downs to get his corners matched up with specifically with the receivers and play a little press sometimes. offensively. So Brian Dable, offensive coordinator. So, right, Brian Dable, right, regarded as one of the best developers of young quarterbacks, most notably for his work with Josh Allen in Buffalo. And even last year, Jackson Dart showed like he belonged on an NFL team last year. So Dable's system, so it's very different from like the popular, like, right, Shanahan wide zone system. So Dable uses concepts instead of individual routes. So, for example, one word basically tells all the receivers on the play the general concept, say like, slant or flat, regardless of where the receivers line up. So this can allow an offense to play with more tempo and more rhythm and make it much easier for the quarterback to check out of a play at the line of scrimmage. So, I would expect to see a lot from his receivers and tight ends because he really wants his receivers to know every spot on the field. And you might see sometimes some players lining up differently, like receivers or tight ends could possibly line up in the backfield. Dable utilizes a lot of RPOs, a lot of run pass options and design QB runs, right, which we saw from Josh Allen in Buffalo. And we saw some from Dart in the Giants last year. So a lot of design quarterback runs to keep defenses off balance. I think that'll be a big staple of what he'll do with Cam Ward. So let's talk about free agency fits. So a lot of similarity here, right? To a team coming off a poor season. They don't have a lot of weapons similar to the Raiders. I actually had this, Tom, as a George Pickens potential spot here,
Yep.
right? We talked about him with the Raiders. We'll talk about him now with the Titans. So though the Cowboys are expected to use the tag, the Titans have the money to spend. They need to get a receiver here, whether it's a guy, again, whether it's a Pickens or an A.J. Brown, Brandon Ayuk,
Yep.
whoever. They have the money in here to bring in a number one receiver. They can pair that guy with a guy like Calvin Ridley, who's coming off an injury shortened season, but Calvin Ridley could be a really good number two here. They're young. They have young second-year players, as I mentioned earlier, Cameron Deke, Eric Alaminer, that they can pair for Cam Ward. A guy like Wan'Dale Robinson could be a guy here. He knows Daboll. Daboll's familiar with him from the Giants. He could be a great option in the slot. Maybe this is an Alec Pierce spot. If he's able to hit the market, the Titans could potentially steal him from a division rival, and he could be their number one receiver. Either way, the Titans need to get some weapons around Cam Ward. A couple of guys I'll hit up on defense here. This could be a spot for a guy like Devin Lloyd if he hits the market. I think Saleh would love to pair a guy like Lloyd with Cedric Gray to potentially give the Titans an elite linebacker duo. This was kind of similar to when Saleh was with the Jets. He had Quincy Williams and C.J. Mosley in the middle of that defense. Jets had the best defensive pair in football for a couple of years there. Another guy here they could go with, Jalen Phillips. He only had 5 sacks last season. He got traded over to Philadelphia later in the year from Miami. He was a top pressure percentage guy in the league, and he would be a perfect fit for Saleh's wide 9 scheme, as would a guy like Odafe Owe. He's coming off a 7.5 season here, and he also fits Saleh's wide 9 scheme. As I mentioned earlier, Saleh and the Titans today acquired Jermaine Johnson from the Jets, straight up for T'Vondre Sweat. So that tells me that the Jets, I mentioned it last week when we were talking about the Jets, they're probably going to play a lot more 3-4 base, and T'Vondre Sweat would be that perfect nose tackle to have in that scheme. But for the Titans here, I think the Titans technically won the trade a little bit, as I do feel like there's more upside with Jermaine Johnson coming over from the Jets. Jermaine Johnson, so he's coming off a torn Achilles from 2 seasons ago. He showed a lot of promise though, like his second season, I think he had like 7.5 sacks. If you're a Titans fan, and I know I saw on Titans Twitter today, they were going freaking nuts. Oh, Borgonzi, man, he fleeced the Jets, Jermaine Johnson's not going to be a double-digit sack guy. That's just not going to happen. But Jermaine Johnson could be a very solid, like 6 to 8 sack guy who can play the big end and can stop the run, make a couple tackles in the backfield. That's what Jermaine Johnson is. But if you're expecting a guy like him to put up like double-digit sacks every single year, sorry, you're going to be disappointed. That's not the player that he is. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He was one of my favorite players on the Jets. He's a rock-solid player, and he busts his ass every time he was out there. He is coming off a down year, but he'll probably be motivated to get back with Saleh, as Saleh was the main guy who was pushing for the Jets to draft him in the 2022 draft as that part of that third first round pick that they had. So, yeah, there's your breakdown on the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if the trade changes maybe what the Titans are looking to do at number 4. They have the 4th pick in the draft. I wonder if now maybe this shifts this football team and they look to take Cardinal Tate at 4.
Mm-hmm.
Edge, I think everybody was pretty dead set that this team needed help on the edge. They need help on the line too. So maybe Malagoa's the player they look at here. But again, they're another roster that I kind of look at this roster and I go, they need to like spend money this offseason and they need to add talent to this roster. If you just look at their roster, and Cam Ward played well in the second half of the year. I think he showed enough flashes, especially when you look at this wide receiving and tight end core. That like, hey, he did well, all things considered. I get the Calvin Ridley thing. He's not a free agent, right? He will be back on this team next
He'll be
year if
back.
he's healthy. So I get it. They took a risk on Ridley. It hasn't really worked out. They need a number 1 wide receiver. However you can get it. If it's Cardinal Tate, awesome. If you got to trade for one of these guys, awesome. You have the money to do it. Take on the A.J. Brown salary. I'm sure he'd love to go back there, but I mean, just find a way to add a quality wide receiver. I would not place a franchise tag on this tight end.
Mm-hmm.
He's a decent football player. If he gets franchised, I think that'd put him in the top 6 or 7 paid tight ends. That's before Njoku gets paid. He'll get a decent amount, but he's just nowhere near that caliber. They need linemen. They need tackles. Skoransky was good. Other than that, they were not good on the offensive line. And this team needs secondary help. They need. They traded away starters. This season, L'Jarius Sneed was not good. They need corners as well. So this is a team that, as it sounds very similar to the Raiders, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have money to spend. They need to go spend it. If that means you need to overpay for some of these guys, then overpay. As long as they fit your scheme and what you're looking to do. I know you have a different feeling on Robert Saleh than I do, but I actually think this is a pretty good hire for Tennessee, all things considered. I think he'll at least build a culture there, and this team kind of needs that. I like Dable as an offensive coordinator. I liked what he did in Buffalo as an offensive coordinator. So, like, I'm actually, like, kind of intrigued by these two together. But if this team doesn't add talent on both sides of the football, it's not going to matter. So, yeah, they can go out and look to trade for one of these wide receivers. If not, I might pay Mike Evans a little bit of money to help Cam Ward. They have to be involved with the guards in free agency, get themselves there. And these top corners and even safeties go out there and try and add a Jamel Dean, a guy that you know is going to help your secondary right now. Look at these safeties who are available. Try and pay 1 or 2 of them now and just add that. And then they need to draft well. This is a team that is not drafted well. It's not a shock that you look at some of these teams that we're talking about that have a lot of money to spend in free agency. They have money because they're not re-signing their own draft picks. That means their draft picks weren't good. Plain and simple. This is a team that is not drafted well. So they have to draft better, and they're going to have to go out and spend some money and probably overpay for some guys this offseason.
Yeah, I think, as far as like, overall thoughts on Robert Saleh, right? I mean, as I said, he wasn't good with the Jets at all. And I was actually surprised that he got another head coaching job as quickly as he did. I thought maybe he needed a couple more years as a defensive coordinator before a team was going to be willing to give him another chance. Apparently he's a great interviewer. So he gets the Titans head coaching job. And I tell you, I will say this about Robert Saleh, his defense is really good. He knows defense. If I was like a head coach and I had to put a staff together, I'm calling up Robert Saleh to run my defense. I really am, because he's that good with defense. Now, I will say his first year with the Jets, the defense was really bad. So don't be surprised if this is kind of like, they have to get the scheme in the door here. There's going to be some adjusting. So don't be surprised if the defense is off this year in his first year. But what's good about where he's going this year, he's going in with an experienced OC with Brian Dable. So, right, when he was with the Jets, there wasn't a lot of experience in the room. He had Mike LaFleur, Matt's younger brother. He was the offensive coordinator for a couple of years, and then they hired Nathaniel Hackett, which was a complete freaking mess with Rodgers. It wasn't good. Robert Saleh, as good as he is with defense, he doesn't know anything about offense. So the fact he has a guy like Dable coming with him, it gives me a lot more confidence for a hire, because I really felt like Saleh, when he gets another head coaching job, which I figured he would eventually, he needed to go to a team with an offense already basically built, which the Titans isn't. I actually thought a team like the Bengals, if they got rid of Zach Taylor, I thought that would have been a perfect spot for Robert Saleh to go. But with that being said, I like that, you've got the head coach of the defense in Saleh, you've got the head coach of the offense in Dable. It could work. It could. And,
Yep.
the AFC South, there's not a lot of world beaters in that division. I mean, the Texans, right, they have a really good roster, but we're unsure about the quarterback. And then the Colts, who I'm really looking forward to talking about the Colts whenever they land on the wheel. We got some stuff to talk about with the Colts. But, yeah, I mean, the division, this could end up being like a wide open division. Maybe not really this year with the Texans roster, but maybe in the following year. So definitely this could be a good year for the Titans to really start building, and then maybe they can make the move the season after to really make an impact, and maybe they can challenge for the division.
And Finn, what happened with the GM? Did they fire him? Did they keep him?
Borgonzi, he's still there. Yeah, he was hired when Brian Callahan was still the coach. So
Yep.
again, it made the timing kind of weird, though. It kind of felt like Callahan was on like his last legs there, which Callahan did dude, it was bad. Like Callahan did so bad this past year. Like look at it. He didn't get any coordinator work. I think he caught on somewhere as a quarterback coach. I don't know where. I think he's working somewhere as a QB coach. But yeah, his team was a complete mess over there. And again, first year under Cam Ward, it didn't help that Cam Ward looked like really, really bad when Callahan was there. So hopefully Brian Dable, hopeful for the Titans. I have a couple of friends that are Titans fans. Hopefully they can turn it around with those two guys, Dable and Saleh. But we'll see what they do. All right, so we will get the Titans off the wheel. We will go to the NFC. You just spoke about Seattle. Let me see.
Seattle.
We got to get the confetti back up here. What's going on here?
I think we got it now.
There we go. Get that confetti back up there for the Rams.
All right, let me get the LA Rams up here, and then we will start talking about them. Let me just find them here on this doc. There we are. Okay. The Los Angeles Rams, a third postseason trip for the Rams won't be enough. The Rams finished 12-5, second in the toughest division in football, but lost not only to their division rival, but eventual Super Bowl champion, the Seattle Seahawks. The Rams have plenty coming back, and as good as a personnel department and coaching staff in this league, the Rams look to reload this offseason and look to compete again for Super Bowl next season. So the Rams cap situation, they are under the cap. The Rams have around $40 million. I think they have a little over $40 million. Extension candidates. The first guy you're gonna hear about is Puka Nacua. The 2023 fifth-round pick has become one of the best receivers in the league, and his new contract is coming due. There's a real chance he resets the wide receiver market that Jamar Chase set in 2025 at $42.5 million a season. We talked about that with Jackson Swift and Jigba, so it's good that they're kind of back-to-back now when talking about the two of them. One of these two will probably get around 42 to 43, and then the other one, it wouldn't shock me if they get 45. I wouldn't be shocked if both these guys are in and around 45. They're probably the two top wide receivers in football right now. So Puka, they will look to extend him sooner rather than later. The next is Brian Young, another from the 2023 draft class. Young was a third-round pick. He's been outstanding for the Rams, capping off his best season to date. Definitely someone the Rams are going to look to hang on to and look to extend this offseason. The next is Kobe Bryant, and shocker, it's another from that 23 class and another major contributor to this team. 24 sacks in 3 seasons as a defensive tackle is something the Rams don't plan on losing. They'll look to extend Kobe Turner as well, and then Steve Avila, the first-round talent that they got at the top half, I think, of the second. I think he was a second-round pick. Has developed into one of the best guards in football. He's another one that will get extended. So again, when we talk about the Rams, we talk about how much money they have, which is $44 million. They have a way to free up more, which we're going to talk about shortly. Some of that money, actually a good chunk of that money, is going to have to go to extending these 3 guys. Actually, Avila might be a 2023 draft as well. Give me a second. Let me look that up. Yeah. So when we talk about drafting and personnel department, all 4 players that have to extend this year are from that 2023 draft class. So just an unbelievable job, as usual, from the Rams front office. But now they need to find the money to extend these guys. So Guys they can restructure. Matt Stafford, and we're going to talk about him as kind of like a what will he do candidate as well. But his 2026 contract becomes fully guaranteed on March 15th. They can convert that to a bonus and free up $11.7 million. Devontae Adams, same thing. His salary can be converted and they can create $18 million. Now, these guys are kind of risky guys to do that with, especially a guy like Devontae Adams, who his contract, I believe, as I'm looking it up now, yeah, it expires at the end of next year. So if they're looking to kick that money down the line and not extend him, they're going to have to pay that contract out when he's not on the team, but we'll see what they do with him. Alaric Jackson, they're going to convert his money and free up almost $16 million there. And Quentin Lake, another guy they're going to look to free up. They can free up almost $9 million. So again, they need to extend these guys and they can create more cap to do so by moving some of this money around. Now, what will they do with guys? Stafford's really the only guy. He's 38 years old. His contract will become fully guaranteed on March 15th. If he were to retire, the Rams would eat that money, but it's not a likely scenario, but it's something we'll keep an eye on. If he retires, it would hurt the Rams. If he doesn't retire, how do they handle the contract? Do they look to extend him, or do they let him walk at the end of his contract? Will he retire at the end of next year? It's something that the Rams really have to start to kind of plan for now. And we'll talk about that when we come to needs. And I think we kind of highlighted that a little bit in the mock draft when we took a quarterback. I think the most likely scenario is that Stafford plays on the contract that he has this year, which let me see if I can get that number. It is a big cap hit this year for the Rams. But I think the most likely scenario is that Stafford looks to play. Yeah, the contract is $48 million. It's a $48 million cap hit this year. And again, they can deal with that this year and still be okay. They've already restructured it to a point where they're going to be paying his contract off into 2030. So I'm very curious to see what they do with Stafford and how they handle that. They're free agents. The first was Rob Haverstein. He's retired, so they don't have to worry about that. Cameron Curl, they just signed Quentin Lake to a big extension. I don't think Cameron Curl, add in the fact that they have Cameron Kitchen, and I think Cameron Curl, who was phenomenal for them last year, but I think he hits the open market and gets a bigger payday elsewhere. Roger McCreary, who they traded for at the deadline, his spot track value is $6.1 million. I think he gets more than that, and I think the Rams let him walk. Tyler Higbee, if he chooses to play next year, he's been rumored that he might look to retire. I think they'd like to keep him in an ideal world. When you look at the guys in and around him, they're a team that uses multiple tight ends. The Colby Parkinson and Terrence Ferguson both got more of an extended role. Again, it'll come down to price and what type of money they have. If they can keep him, I think they'll look to keep him. Or this is a team that'll let him walk and then replace him with a guy they draft in day 3. That's what they do. And then Kobe Durant's another name I have here, but I think he hits free agency. And they look to replace him in the draft. So needs. And again, we're talking about a football team that is still really well positioned to compete next year. So the first one I have here is quarterback. I wouldn't say it's a need, but the Rams know they have to start planning for life after Stafford, even if they extend him by a year or two. He turned 38. They know the clock's ticking. They have 2 first-round picks. Again, I did it in the mock, and I still think this is a scenario where this is a team that looks to, whether they take him with that second first-round pick or they look to trade back in the second round and maybe take Nussmeier or the kid from North Dakota State. I think they are a team that looks to grab a quarterback within the first 2 days of the draft. Wide receiver. Again, this isn't a pressing need, but Devontae Adams has a year left on his deal. Xavier Smith was the third wide receiver in terms of receiving yards for the Rams this year. I think they maybe look to get a more dynamic player in the slot, or they just draft a guy that they, at the end of next year, they can let Devontae Adams walk and they have his replacement in there. Center. This would be a luxury. The Rams offensive line is very good, and center was maybe their weakest chance. If there's a spot for them to look to upgrade on their line, it would be at center. for me, their main needs are on the defensive side of the football. The first would be linebacker. Nate Landman was great against the run. Undrafted rookie Omar Spates kind of struggled. I think they were hoping he could give them more. If they're looking to upgrade a position on defense, somebody a position that they can get better at instantly. I think linebacker is one of them. Maybe free agency, maybe the draft, and cornerback. I would not be shocked if the Rams looked to the corner with one of their picks. Especially with that pick they got from Atlanta, which will be a top 15 pick. If Delane or McCoy are there, and McCoy's not going to work out at the combine, so I know that's raised some red flags, but I think if either one of those guys are there, the Rams would look to jump on one of those two, and those guys could become like legitimate number one corners for this team. And the last thing I have of note here is the Rams special teams unit just has to get better in general. They're one of the worst special team units in football this year, and if this team wants to win a Super Bowl, they need to improve in that phase of football.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the secondary we saw, really in their 3-game playoff run last year, the coverage efficiency really wasn't that great. They gave up actually over 800 passing yards in their 3 playoff game run, and their coverage efficiency, like I said, really took a nosedive late in the season. And as you mentioned, a couple guys free agents, like Kobe Durant, Akilla Weatherspoon, Roger McCreary. So they're going to need to, they really need to restock that position if they're not going to be able to bring back, any of those guys. Rob Havenstein, you mentioned, yeah, he retired, so right, it creates a hole on the offensive line. The Rams, I guess they'll see if Warren McClendon Jr. could be the long-term replacement. Maybe they give him the start, but maybe they also add somebody in the draft, maybe as like potentially their long-term guy. Maybe they compete in camp for the job. And yeah, you mentioned Cam Curl, right? He's set to be a free agent. They already re-signed Cameron Lake, so if he walks, they'll need to find a replacement. So their secondary, I mean, it could potentially look a little different, going into next season. And of course, right, Stafford, as you said, I mean, right, I mean, he's basically, it feels like he's playing basically year to year right now. So, and I know, right, the Rams typically, I don't think they're really a team that thinks of really kind of future. They're more in the present. They kind of like to think right now than later, but I'm sure it's in the back of their minds that they got to find a successor here. So free agency fits. I mean, for their right tackle position, I was looking at a guy like Braden Smith, veteran player with, he's got over 100 career starts. He's dealt with some injuries, but if the Rams are looking for a guy who could just kind of like plug and play and fit into that right tackle spot that's been deserted now by Havenstein, he could be, he would make a lot of sense. Sorry, Tom, I don't recall what you said about their cap situation, but I mean, if there's any way they could spend money, maybe they want to, maybe if there's any way they could spend money, maybe Jamel Dean would make sense here. Maybe I don't think he'd be willing to take a pay cut to play for a contender, but if they can't sign him, right, I look at a guy like Alontae Taylor. He could be a fallback option. He's a guy who's elite speed. He had 11 pass breakups last season. And maybe a guy like, I don't know, again, Jalen Watson, I don't know if he'll be on their radar. Maybe a Tariq Woolen. But yeah, they really need to look at options at the cornerback position. And if you're looking for like maybe a quarterback for them, it was actually just today I just saw came out, Anthony Richardson. He requested a trade from the Colts. What's his market value right now? Could you get could you give up maybe like a 4th or a 5th to get him? Maybe you bring him in. He could back up Stafford on a year-to-year basis, and maybe they can turn to him by like maybe the 2028 season to take over as a starter, maybe.
Dean's first off to the cap situation. They have money to spend, and even with signing some of these guys, they're probably going to backload all these contracts anyway. I think Jamel Dean's a really good shout. I think that would make a lot of sense. I think that's a move that, they might have to pay him a good amount of money, but if that's really the only place they go to spend big money, I think that could make sense. Devin Bush might make sense for this team too. In terms of linebacker, they definitely need to improve at that part of the field. So maybe somebody like Devin Bush as well could be an option for them.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's the Rams. Okay, so we got the Rams, so we'll take them off the wheel, and we'll go to the AFC. I just want to double-check my AFC real quick. So, okay, so we got Titans. So we've spoken about the Titans. We spoke about the Raiders. I'm getting all like the lower-end teams so far tonight, I think, right? Man, still haven't touched on any of these teams in the AFC North. Look at this. They're all just waiting. All right, let's go. Let's roll with it. This has to be an AFC North team. Give me the Ravens here. How about the Ravens? Oh, ask and you shall receive. Be more. The record, that's the second time I predicted the team. If you the team I was gonna get, if you recall, I had my Jets moment last week when I got the New York Jets. So now we get the Baltimore Ravens. Very, very disappointing season for our homies in Baltimore. All right, so the Baltimore Ravens, right? So the Ravens entered this past season really as one of the favorites to reach the Super Bowl, but instead they fell well short of those expectations, going 8-9. So this was actually the first time they missed the playoffs and finished with a losing record since 2021. I'm sure I don't want to remind the Ravens fans, but of course, as everyone should recall, they had their shot in Week 18 to win the AFC North against the Steelers. Tyler Loop missed a 44-yard field goal as time expired. Heartbreaking end to a disappointing season, and this disappointment led to John Harbaugh being fired after 18 seasons. I do want to just point out that the way this was going for the Ravens, I really believe that even if the Ravens had won that game, and like let's say they had the same fate as the Steelers, they lost to Houston in the wild card round, I still think Harbaugh was out from there. Lamar Jackson, right? I mean, he remained a high level passer, but he was affected by injuries during the season, right? He had a hamstring issue, he had back issues, and it really affected his mobility. He missed 4 games. The offense finished 11th in scoring and 13th in total yards, which actually was still a notable drop as they led the league in total yards in 2024. Now, there were bright spots for the team. Zay Flowers secured his second consecutive 1,000-yard season. Kyle Hamilton was a first-team All-Pro. Derrick Henry, at the age of 31, rushed for 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns, which is an incredible season for him. The defense finished middle of the pack, ranking 18th in scoring and 24th in total defense. And the pass defense was a major liability as it ranked 30th in the league. Their top sack producer was Travis Jones. He's an interior defensive tackle. He had 5. That's how much the Ravens pass rush struggled last season. The front office really needs to look into restructuring Lamar's massive cap hit. His cap hit is $74.5 million. They have got to do something here to create some cap room. So here we go with their free agents entering the year. So we talk about him. It feels like almost every other team. Tyler Linderbaum, right, who's the big fish in free agency. He's the center. He's been the anchor for their offensive line. 3-time Pro Bowler and will likely command top of the market money. Most likely he'll become the highest paid center in the league by whichever team signs him. I don't see that being the Ravens. I don't know what the cap number, or excuse me, what the tag number is for centers, but I really don't think the Ravens are going to tag him either. I think this is just, one of their best players that they'll end up losing. Another guy who I really like that I think they're going to possibly end up losing, Isaiah Likely, the tight end. Baltimore has already extended Mark Andrews, so Likely looks like he'll get a contract elsewhere. I don't see Baltimore paying big money to 2 tight ends, though in my opinion, I think I would have paid Likely instead of Mark Andrews. Another guy who's a free agent, defensive guys now, Draymond Jones. He was acquired from the Titans before the trade deadline, and he did help out their pass rush a little bit when he came over. But again, the Ravens tied for a league low in 30 sacks last season. That's it. So the pass rush has to be the number one need for this team for this upcoming free agency period. Another guy here is a free agent, safety Alohi Gilman. He was another midseason acquisition who came over from the Chargers. So before the Ravens acquired him, their defense was actually allowing about 35 points per game. They bring him in, and that number drops to 17 points per game. So while he helped anchor the back end, this allowed the Ravens to play Kyle Hamilton a little closer to the line of scrimmage. Another benefit that for him, Alohi Gilman, was he was coached by Jesse Minter halfway through the season last year, right? Jesse Minter comes over as the new head coach, former DC with the Chargers. So there's familiarity with the defensive system there. Another guy I have here at corner, Chidobe Awuzie, great value. He was a great value signing for them last season. He actually ranked in the top 5 among NFL quarters according to PFF. But by late November, he only allowed about 178 receiving yards on 31 targets, and his play was actually so good last season, the Ravens were a lot more flexible with their defensive rotations, sometimes even leaving Awuzie on an island so they could help out Nate Wiggins on the other side. So I mentioned Jesse Winter. So let's talk about him a little bit, right? So Minter, again, I've said it a lot, as you see, it's the big trend in the NFL for defensive guys, the simulated pressures, right? 6 or 7 men at the line of scrimmage who are looking like they're going to blitz pre-snap to force the quarterback into a hot read. You only drop you drop those players though back in the coverage. You only rush 4. And again, it's a similar system really overall to what Mike Macdonald runs with the Seahawks. And right, big surprise, Macdonald and Minter, they're both Harbaugh guys. So that's what really makes this really interesting to me. Like Jesse Minter worked on, right? He worked with Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers and with Michigan. When Harbaugh was at Michigan, Jesse Minter was on the Ravens staff under John Harbaugh for a couple of years. So it's almost like you go from John Harbaugh, you bring in maybe like Harbaugh light, maybe a guy who's more innovative, he's younger, maybe he's got more creative ideas, but that's what the Ravens chose to do, to bring in Jesse Minter this year. So right, the Chargers under Minter were ranked 28th in blitz percentage, but his units were actually in the top 10 for sacks and pressures because the QB most of the time didn't know which 4 were coming at him. So Jesse Minter was really a master of those simulated blitzes. I would expect Minter to use Kyle Hamilton all over the defense, similar to what he did in LA with Derwin James. I think Hamilton, he's going to play in the slot. He might play box linebacker, deep safety, maybe even corner. We'll see how Minter wants to line him up, because Minter also runs a lot of zone coverage. Really, his defense runs zone coverage like 80% of the time, which is one of the highest in the NFL. So on the offensive side of the ball, offensively, Minter brings in Declan Doyle. He's the offensive coordinator. He comes over from Chicago. He was the offensive coordinator with Ben Johnson with the Bears. He's only 29 years old. He's the youngest offensive coordinator in the NFL. Grant Udinski was 29 with Jacksonville. He just turned 30 like a couple of weeks ago. So technically Doyle's the youngest offensive coordinator in the league now. So like I said, offensive coordinator with Chicago last year, but he didn't call the plays, as that's Ben Johnson's thing. So we're really not sure about what his specific tendencies are going to be, but I would think he would be, right, he's going to be influenced by Ben Johnson. He spent some time on Sean Payton's staff too in New Orleans and Denver, so I would think there's going to be some Sean Payton influence there as well. So the assumptions I'll make for that, what he will bring to the Ravens offense, is really kind of like what we see with Ben Johnson, heavy use of pre-snap motion, right, which is a staple of the Ben Johnson style offense. Last year, the Ravens used pre-motion 52% of the time. By contrast, Doyle's previous systems that he's worked in used pre-motion over 80% of the snaps to help diagnose coverages. So I think this is going to be an up-tempo style while they try to integrate the tight ends. He's a former tight ends coach under Sean Payton in Denver, and I think he'll look to use his tight ends to create mismatches. A couple of weeks ago, we did an NFL mock draft. Who did I have the Ravens taking, Tom? Do you remember? The tight end from Oregon, Sadiq. So I think this would be a great fit. You bring him in, you put him with like a Mark Andrews, be able to put him, Sadiq would be a guy who could line up all over the field. While in Chicago, right, Doyle, he oversaw Caleb Williams. Caleb had a breakout season last year, threw for 3,900 yards, 27 touchdowns. And I think he'll bring some more innovative ideas for Lamar Jackson and for the Ravens offense to run. Maybe some more trick play sets, right? Like Ben Johnson has become famous for over the past couple of years. So let's talk about free agents who fit here. So Jalen Watson's a guy from the Chiefs. Minter's zone coverage, like I said, he requires his physical. He likes to play a lot of zone. He requires corners though who need to be able to tackle in space. Jalen Watson can do that. Watson's played in some complex blitz coverage rotations, right? Being under Steve Spagnuolo for a couple of years in Kansas City. He'd also help out in run support too. I think he'd be a good replacement for a guy like Awuzie. He's younger. He's more physical. Awuzie might get more money on the open market. So I'd project maybe that they can bring Jalen Watson in for maybe like he might be like a $14-15 million a year range for a corner. Rashid Shaheed is another guy I have here. Shaheed is a guy who could really benefit from free releases off the line of scrimmage. Maybe in Doyle's system, they can go from, lining him up in some creative alignments. I think he's a good enough player to take advantage of specific mismatches. I'm going I think he can probably land here in Baltimore, maybe like I don't know, $13 million a year contract for like a 3-year deal. He's 27 years old. Maybe he could be locked into a contract until he's 30 and hit the market again. And then on defensively, as I said, it has to be their number one priority. They need pass rush help. What Bradley Chubb, maybe a guy like Jalen Phillips. Chubb could be added as a pass rusher and does fit the Baltimore scheme. Phillips has one of the best pressure rates. I mentioned him a little earlier for a team like the Titans or Raiders. He had one of the best pressure rates in the league last season. He could be a long-term cornerstone on that defensive line. But the Ravens' number one priority, get someone in here who can get to the quarterback. Another guy. It's interesting. So Odafe Owe, they traded for him last year. Or excuse me, they traded him to the Chargers last year to pair with Minter. Minter now comes over to the Ravens to be the head coach. Does Minter want to bring Owe over with him back to Baltimore, which I think Ravens fans might be like, well, why do we want this guy back? He was not good with us last year, but he was great under Minter in LA. So, but whatever they decide to do, they need pass rush help for that defense.
Yeah, with this team, it's going to come down to how they handle the Lamar contract first, right? I know Eric DeCosta was talking at the combine. I have it here, and he said he's confident that they'll extend Lamar Jackson. So they'll probably deal with the contract that way. They'll look to extend him. And then they can kind of figure out their free agent plan from there. And then it kind of comes down to, can they keep Tyler Linderbaum? I'm with you. I just don't think that's going to happen. So center will then become a need for this football team. And then guard as well was an issue that they struggled with a year ago. And to your point, pass rush, they absolutely need to get better at pass rush. They draft 14. I watched Cassius Howell this week. Or actually yesterday, I watched him. He's a guy who could fit this football team at 14, especially if you said we've replaced that 3-4 scheme. So
Yeah.
I have to imagine that, so I have to imagine a guy like Cassius Howell fits that. He could be an option for them. And then I'm with you. I think if they could redo the Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely thing, they would have signed Likely over Andrews. I get it. Andrews was having a great season and already had a great career for Baltimore at the time that they extended him. So Likely probably walks. I think this is a team that, I'd love to see them. It's kind of similar to Buffalo with Josh Allen. Like, can we get Lamar a true proven number one wide receiver? Not these older guys like, I'm sure Mike Evans is going to be a name thrown around, but can we get him Ayuk? Can we get him AJ Brown? Can we get him somebody that's going to be number one for this football team? Is that Jordan Tyson? Does Jordan Tyson get there? He's a little bit different of a mold than Zay Flowers. I think this team needs a physical wide receiver or tight end. If they can find a guy who's similar of a tight end, I think your Sadiq pick, who I just started watching him today, would be a really good shout for them at 14 too. He's a really good run blocker. That's a really underrated part of his game. So that would help with what they want to do with Derrick Henry. But this team needs to fill some of these holes, pass rush, wide receiver, tight end. And then they need to figure out the guard and the center position. If they can find a way to keep Linderbaum and then it's just guard, this line isn't that far off. But if they need to replace guard and center, then I look at it: guard, center, wide receiver, tight end, edge. This is a team that's going to have to end up being active in free agency to fill some of these holes.
Yeah, a lot of hills to be filled here, and as we saw this past year, I mean, that was the reason they went 8-9. It felt like the talent was kind of depreciating.
Yeah, agreed.
And I feel like it, after doing the research further on this team, I think it did make sense for. At the time, I was like, really, they're getting rid of John Harbaugh? I don't know about that, but I think it made sense just from a cultural and ideology shift. I mean, again, like I said earlier, I mean, they bring in Jesse Minner, who, in a way, he could be looked at as like a Harbaugh clone because he has spent time with the Ravens and the Chargers, and he was at Michigan.
Yep.
But, if he's going to be a guy who's going to bring in some new creative ideas on what to do, especially on the defensive side of the ball, this team could really, really use it. So
yeah, I don't think it's
a
a shock that they hired like a hardball disciple. I don't think that's a shock in trying to keep the culture that he established, but giving a fresh voice to it. So I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So we spoke Baltimore. So we will, let's take them off the wheel. For the AFC, here's the NFC. This is what, Tom, your fourth team, I think, tonight?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. So okay, so you've got 2 more. I got 1 more for the AFC. All right, let's see who we got. Who you want? Call them out. Who you want? Oh, oh,
I don't really care. The
Lions.
Lions will be fun.
Dan Campbell's
All
Detroit
right.
Lions.
So the Detroit Lions, a disappointing 9-4 season finish. Saw the Lions team that dealt with what felt like weekly season-ending injuries and missing out on the playoffs after really being 2 years removed from an NFC Championship game. The Lions have done an excellent job retaining players, but with less and less cap space, it'll be more. It's going to be more difficult for Brad Holmes to kind of keep this core intact. So where are the Lions? They are over the cap as of now, but they have ways to create more cap space to get themselves under the cap. So extension candidates, and they have a couple. Jeremiah Gibbs is the first, the running back out of Alabama. One of the best weapons in football. Gibbs is a year away from his fifth-year option. Odds are that the Lions and Gibbs look to talk extension this offseason, this summer, before even considering the fifth-year option. The next is Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell, linebacker. He's been a stud, one of the best players on this Lions defense. Like Gibbs, I think they'll likely look to extend him before having to pick up the fifth-year option. Both these guys' options will be picked up if it comes to that, but I think they look to extend both those guys. Tight end Sam Laporta, a 2023 draft pick. He's kind of been the safety net for Jared Goff, was on pace to have a career high in receiving yards and catches before getting hurt. The back injury kept him out for the rest of the season. I think he got injured week 10, and it might be something that Detroit keeps an eye on. But if they look to retain him, he's going to get a nice extension. And the last extension candidate is Brian Branch. He's been unbelievable for Detroit. He got hurt. He blew out his Achilles in a game against Dallas. Like Laporta, I wouldn't be shocked if they look to kind of keep an eye on him, but he's probably one that I think they're more willing to lock into now with how important and how good he's been for that defense. And he'll probably be one of the bigger, higher paid safeties paid at his position in the NFL. So restructure options. The first is Jared Goff. They can convert his 2026 salary to a signing bonus. They're going to free up almost $42 million. They'll create a nice space with him. They'll restructure Amon-Ra St. Brown as well, free up $21.5 million there. Penei Sewell, another guy that they'll free up around $15 million. So right there between those guys, we're talking about $70 million freed up for a team that I believe is $20 million or around there underneath over the cap right now. And DJ Reed is probably another player they'll look to free up and convert. They'll free up around $11 million there. So what to do with players. The first one is Taylor Decker. If he retires, the Lions will free up $11 million. I don't think there's been any word on what he's doing. I'm looking that up here as I'm talking about him.
I think I heard he might come back another
the other
year.
day,
I thought I saw.
Yeah, yep. 2 days ago, he announced he's returning. So that's off the table there. Tackle no longer is a concern either, so I'm sure they're very, very happy about that. David Montgomery, he could be a June 1st cut option. They'd free up around $6 million. They could look to trade him as well before June 1st and free up around $3 million. So we'll see what they look to do with him. And Terron Arnold is a player I think is kind of in that case of hasn't really worked out for them, was a high draft pick. Do they and Arnold look for a change of scenery and see if maybe he can continue his career elsewhere and the Lions can get something in return from him. So the Lions, they are a team that likes to look to retain their own free agents. Al-Quadra Muhammad is a player that they signed on a very cheap deal. He was unbelievable in his second year for Detroit. He had 11 sacks in 17 games. In an ideal world, I think the Lions would like to keep him. It's going to come down to price. Spotrac has him valued at $8.3 million. I think he'll get paid more than that. If he does, I don't think he stays in Detroit. Alex Anzalone signed with the Lions in 2021. Could be one of those players who wants to test free agency, see what his market is like, but probably someone Detroit wants to hang on to. Spotrac has him valued at $7.5 million. Roy Lopez is a defensive lineman that signed on a one-year deal last year. I think the Lions would like to hang on to him. They had him and Reeder. There's going to be concerns with Lim McNeil and what his health is like. Lopez would be a good rotation piece, but again, are they going to be priced out for a player like that? Spotrac has him valued at $6.3 million. Amik Robertson signed a 2-year deal in 24. He's valued at $4 million. I wouldn't be shocked if they let him walk. DJ Reader, the defensive lineman who signed in 2024, like Lopez, I think Detroit would like to retain him so they can kind of have a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Not familiarity, but just an idea of what they have coming back to play with McNeil. Khalif Raymond's a free agent, valued at $3.3 million. I think they let him walk. And Rocky Sim signed a 1-year deal. If they can get him on a 1-year deal, I think they'd look to keep him, but odds are they let him walk. So they hired a new defensive coordinator, a new offensive coordinator this year. It's Drew Pretzig, which I think is going to be very interesting because when you look at this Lion offense, I don't necessarily look at what he does and feel he fits very well. Like he's a heavy 13 personnel guy. So that kind of fits into the needs, which is I think this team's going to need another tight end. Yeah, they have Sam Laporta. But this is an offense coordinator that plays a lot of 13 personnel. Laporta's coming off of an injury, so I could see them looking to add a tight end. I think their center and guard are two issues or two needs as well. If they can add a center and move Graham Glasgow back to guard, I think that'll help the line. But if they're looking for Glasgow to play center, I really think they need to look to get him a little bit of competition and add a guard. I do think they look to move Glasgow back to guard where he was pretty good last year and look to then add a center, whether through the draft or free agency, and shore up kind of those two positions that way. Edge. I think they can add an edge to help out Aiden Hutchinson, who's still one of the better pass rushers in football. If Al-Quadra Muhammad comes back, I think that fills that need. I think they'll be happy with those two. And then it's just looking to add like a third or fourth option where they can kind of shop in that second and third tier of defensive end. And then corner. This is a football team that when you look at their corners last year, DJ Reed, Rocky Sim were two of the guys that played a lot. Amik Robertson played a lot. Like this is a team that if they can't retain some of these guys in the secondary, they're going to have to replace them, and they'll look to do that whether it's the draft or free agency. You know, this is a team that I think they're looking to add an elite corner. They haven't had an elite corner. They drafted Terran Arnold. He hasn't been that guy. We'll see how much money they free up. But of all the positions we just named, if they look to shop at the high end for one position, I have to imagine it's corner. And whether it's Jamel Dean, maybe it's not Jamel Dean. Maybe it is an Eric Stokes who had a decent year. Maybe it's a guy that they look to bring in and play within their system and can become a top corner for this football team.
Yeah, it was pretty concerning how I will say about the offensive line, how much of it did become a liability, you know, just a few years ago. I mean, they were like easily top 5 offensive line in the league, but the unit did drop to, from what I saw, 13th overall in PFF rankings, which it's still top half of the league, but it just wasn't up to the standard that they had set in previous seasons under Campbell. Like you said, Frank Ragnow, he's retired, right? So there's an opening at center. Taylor Decker, right? He's back, but if he's considering retiring, I guess he's got 1 year left. So, priority is going to be, finding whoever's going to fit that role going forward. So it will become a major priority probably next year. And then guard depth there too. Yeah. Graham Glasgow, he's a guy, he's getting up there in age too. I mean, like you said, maybe he could be a guy that moves over to center. But yeah, and I saw a report online. People were saying that at the combine, I guess the Lions were trying to talk up already talking to some agents about like offensive linemen potentially. So they're already sniffing around
That makes
the offensive line market. Defensive line, yeah, Aiden Hutchinson, right, still had a great year, coming off the major injury that he had the previous season. But yeah, right now under contract, he's really the only threat off the edge. Muhammad, he did have a good year, but he's going to be in a free agent, and I don't know if the Lions, right, we don't know if they're going to really have the cap to bring him back. So they're probably going to want to I shouldn't say probably, they want to pair somebody with Hutchinson to be maybe a more physical counterpart on the opposite side. And then another need that I have here, I just have safety here just because Branch coming off the Achilles. We don't really know his status. I don't know if he's going to be ready for week 1. Kirby Joseph had an injury too this past year. I think he had a knee injury. So
Yeah.
their whole secondary overall was, they were all banged up last year. So whether they bring in, a guy who needs to start for a couple of games at the beginning of the year or not, they need to add definitely some more depth there at safety. And yeah, like you said, they're currently projected over the cap. So yeah, some restructures, Goff or Amon-Ra St. Brown, they're going to have to try to maybe move some money around here if they want to be active in free agency and be cap compliant going into the season. So as far as a free agent fits here, I don't know what they really have much to spend, right, with them being over the cap right now. So they're probably going to have to look at cheaper options for the defensive line. I look at a guy like Yetur Gross-Matos. He's more of a physical edge that Detroit could look to pair with Hutchinson. He's more of like a situational guy, but maybe he signs a team-friendly deal as he has had some injuries in the past. Maybe he could fit in there. I have Jack Conklin here. He has ties to Drew Petzing. So maybe he's a guy. Really, any of those Cleveland guys. Cleveland actually, basically their whole for those that don't know, we haven't spoken about Cleveland yet, but their whole offensive line is basically free agents. It's pretty crazy.
Yep.
But Petzing has ties to Cleveland, so maybe some of those guys could fit in over here, whether it's a Conklin or a Wyatt Teller or a Joel Petonio, somebody like that. We'll see. And then, on the back end, I have safety here. I don't think they're going to spend for a guy like Nick Cross, but they've got to bring somebody in here to maybe shore up on the back end, the depth and in the secondary, in order to, if in case the injury bug hits them again, how depleted they ended up being, as they got later into the season. But yeah, it was quite a fall from grace for the Lions. We just spoke about the Ravens, a team that went 8-9. Here are the Lions, another team that fell out of the playoff picture. And looking at the Lions, the way their roster is right now, is it possible that maybe they blew their opportunity a few years ago in that NFC title game in San Francisco? Maybe that was their chance to go to the Super Bowl and win it, and now they're looking like they're going to have to retool a little bit here into a different phase under Dan Campbell.
This roster is still really good. It's just a matter of filling the holes of where they need to fill them. If they can do that, then I think this team can be competing next year. Yeah, we have the questions about Jared Goff and if he's good enough, but they still have Gibbs, they still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, they still have Williams. If they can shore up the interior of that offensive line, they still have 2 top caliber tackles. And yeah, on defense, it's going to come down to, can these guys come back healthy? If Branch and Joseph and McNeil, if they can't come back healthy, then yeah, this football team might struggle on the defensive side of the football. But if these guys can come back healthy, the core is still there. It's just a matter of how much money can they free up, and if it's not going to be in free agency, how well can they draft? And this is a team that's drafted pretty well over the last couple of years. When you look at this roster, they're also a team that does really well in free agency, signing guys to 1 and 2 year deals that outperform the contracts that they signed them to. So there's still a good core there. But to your point, if these guys can't come back healthy, some of these guys, especially on the defensive side of the football, it may feel like a window is, if not closing, it's closed already on them.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. That was the Detroit Lions. So we'll go to the AFC. So this is going to be the last AFC team we talk about for the night. Let's see. I'm going to call it, Tom. Let's go Houston Texans. Give me the Texans. Dude.
No way.
Dude, I tell you, I got to start sports betting more maybe or something, man. I got to get back into it, man.
I was doing tonight, please.
I was doing bet of the day for a little bit on the Loft Sports side. Maybe I got to get back to doing it. I wasn't really winning. I kind of stopped doing it for a while, but I don't know, man. Maybe I got to play like roulette or something like that too. I don't know. Back-to-back calls here, man. So the Houston Texans. Let's see. Let me get to my Texans notes here. Houston. All right. I'm struggling to get to Houston here. Where are they? H comes before I, right? In the alphabet. Yep, here we go. Houston Texans. All right, so Texans go 12-5, right? Finishing second in the AFC South. Let's not forget that this was a team that actually started 0-3. So by week 9, they're sitting at 3-5, and then they go on an absolute tear. They win 9 in a row, 10 if you want to count the playoff game in Pittsburgh, in which their defense absolutely dominated the Steelers before falling short in New England in the divisional round. So the Texans defense ranked second in the league this past season in points allowed at 17.4 per game, and they were first in total yards allowed. They were number 3 in the league with 29 total takeaways. They were second in the league in defensive third down conversion rate at 34%. Will Anderson and Derek Stingley were both named first-team All-Pros. Anderson and Daniil Hunter combined for 27 sacks together. Stingley finished with 4 interceptions and 15 passes defended. Houston allowed the third lowest passer rating to opposing quarterbacks. They were a star-studded potential. They were a Super Bowl defense last year. If Texans had gotten that far, they would have had the defense there to potentially win the game. Now, offense. Finished 18th in total yards per game. Their passing attack was very inconsistent at times. They battled a lot of injuries during the season. CJ Stroud threw for a little over 3,000 yards with 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He had his share of injuries as well. Davis Mills had to come in for a little bit during the year. He did deal with some pressure during the season. He was sacked 31 times as the offensive line. They also went through their share of injuries, so that line was constantly being shuffled around. Nico Collins emerged as a true wide receiver one this past year, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. They got contributions from Dalton Schultz and rookie Jaden Higgins. The biggest hurdle the offense dealt with, at least early in the season, they had a foot injury to Joe Mixon, but they were able to find a consistent running game as the year went on. Rookie Woody Marks and Nick Chubb, the veteran, combined for 1,200 yards on the ground. So let's talk about free agency for them. So they have some guys that could potentially be cap casualties going into this year. If they cut Joe Mixon, who's coming off the injury, they could save about $8.5 million against the cap. Dalton Schultz, if they cut him, that could be $11.5 million. And then Christian Kirk's another guy. They could actually save $18.5 million if they cut Christian Kirk. Out of those three, I would expect them to cut Kirk. I think he's kind of fallen out of the wide receiver mix there. I think they'd rather play Collins and the young guys than play him. One of their most consistent guys, though, that is a free agent that I think they should bring back is Ed Ingram. He's the right guard. He should be considered a massive priority to re-sign. He was their most consistent lineman last year. He's only 27 years old. He was only making a salary of $1.5 million. So whether he stays in Houston or he goes elsewhere, he's going to get himself a nice raise in money. Another one of their key free agents this year, Sheldon Rankins, defensive tackle. So PFF ranked him 28th amongst defensive tackles. He played really well inside. He ate up a lot of blockers on the inside, which allowed Anderson and Hunter to take advantage of the one-on-one opportunities that they got at times. I'll say this. Just about the entire defensive line rotation is up for free agency. You've got Rankins, you've got guys like Tim Settle, Foley Fatukasi, Derek Barnett, Danico Autry. All these guys are hitting the market. So Texans defensive line, I mean, you guys still have Anderson and Hunter, but everybody else is basically up for free agency. So that's going to have to be a major market that they're going to have to be looking into defensive line heading into free agency. So let's talk about coaching a little bit here. So D'Amico Ryans, right? His defense is basically a modernized version of those Seattle Seahawks early 2010s teams. So he comes from the Robert Saleh, Gus Bradley system. He likes to use a lot of wide 9 fronts where I spoke about them earlier when I was talking about Robert Saleh and the Titans. The defensive ends are lining up far outside the tackles in order to create better angles for the pass rush, which forces the quarterback into potentially holding the ball longer while your defensive tackles squeeze the interior gaps. So they operate out of a base nickel package, a 4-2-5, in order to match up best against modern 11 personnel. The system is designed to win with just 4 defensive linemen rushing the quarterback, which the same as I spoke about earlier with actually a lot of the defensive systems we've spoken about over the past 2 weeks. They prefer to just rush 4 and drop everybody back in the coverage, whether it's a standard front 4 or whether it's a disguise. Matt Burke is the DC. He calls the plays there. He was looked at as a potential head coach for some teams this past season, but he'll be back calling the defensive plays for Ryans in Houston. Offensively, so Nick Caley, he's the offensive coordinator. He was there this past season, so this is his second year now. He'll return to Houston. Spent some time with Sean McVay out in LA with the Rams. One of the main reasons for Houston's offensive turnaround during the season was the use of tempo. The Texans really increased the pace after first downs or big plays by forcing defenses to set up quickly. This helped limit this helped their offense limit the defense's ability to substitute or disguise coverages, which actually really helped simplify the reads for CJ Stroud. So Caley, he uses a lot of pre-snap motion to create leverage. He likes to use jet sweeps a lot, and also use some heavy personnel packages, which featured like sometimes a fullback, sometimes an extra lineman on the field to help with the blocking. So free agents that fit here. So number one, I had Ed Ingram here as a guy who they really need to re-sign, as who I spoke about a little earlier. If they can't bring him back, if he's going to be too rich for them, they should try to look into a guy like Wyatt Teller from the Browns. He's an elite puller in gap schemes and could help really diversify that Texans rushing attack. He's coming off injury this past season, so the contract might not be too big for the Texans to handle. Plus maybe Teller might prefer to go to a winning team after being with the Browns for so long. Another guy that they could possibly look into is a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker, who's a free agent from the Jets. He could also fit that scheme in Houston that Kelly likes to run. I have here running back. If Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker hit the market, if the Texans are looking to, splurge on a running back and go all in on one of these guys, I think it makes a lot of sense. Hall's a guy who can make catches out of the backfield. Walker is a punishing runner. He's in the ground game, could create a more physical identity on offense. And then, like I said, the defensive line, they have got to get more bodies in here because everybody's basically hitting free agency. I don't know if I have John Franklin Myers here. We've spoken about him the past couple of weeks when talking about these teams. I think he's a perfect scheme fit here. He ranked 8th last season in pass rush win rate. He can generate pressure from the interior, and that will take pressure off guys like Anderson and Hunter. He was perfect fit in the same type of defense when he was with the Jets with John Franklin Myers, with Robert Saleh. He was able to eat on the inside, and that freed up their edge pass rush to get after quarterbacks. So I think he'd be a perfect fit here. But whether it's him or whether they bring back Sheldon Rankins or some of the other rotational pieces, the Texans' number one focus needs to be in the trenches this offseason. It's got to be offensive line and it's got to be defensive line.
Yeah, they got to figure their cap situation out first. They need to find a way to free up some money because right now they're in the red, or they're a little under the cap. They won't be shopping for any of these guys unless they can figure that out. I agree with you. They need to improve at guard, center. If they can keep Ed Ingram, I think that's a plus for this football team. If they can keep Sheldon Rankins, I think that's a plus for this team. They do need to get younger at those two positions. That'll probably be an area they look to focus in on the draft. I'd like to see this team add a better running back, a more dynamic running back to help this offense out. I'm hoping Tank Dell can come back and be fully healthy because I'm a massive, massive fan of his. And him and Nico Collins are a lot of fun together. And this team needs good play from CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud was not good in their playoff loss. And that is part because of their line, which, if they can add Trent Brown's a free agent, the right tackle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know what their plan is with him, if they want to retain him or add another right tackle. But if they're looking to add another tackle and then a guard and or center, depending on what happens with Ingram, if they can shore up that line and protect Stroud a little bit, they just need better play from their quarterback in the playoffs. And if that's adding a better running back to help in the run game, I think that'll help. I think if you can add another wide receiver, that can help. This defense is really good. You mentioned it. I thought we had 5 really good defenses in the playoffs. They were one of those 5. So if they can get better play from their quarterback and their offense, I don't want to pin it all on Stroud. I know there's been talk about him. Their GM came out at the combine the other day and said speculation of trading CJ Stroud was, and I quote, moronic, and that they are not trading CJ. So he's going to be their quarterback next year. And I think his option year is coming up. So they're going to figure out what they want to do with him, likely pick up that 5th-year option. They have 2 more years with him. And now it's a matter of getting him a running back, improving his offensive line. And to me, if you can add one more wide receiver, if you feel confident in Tank Dell next year, which I hope they are, because I love him as a player. That you have Collins, you have Tank Dell, you can add one more wide receiver. We'll see what happens with Dalton Schultz, whether he becomes a cap casualty or they re-sign him. And you put the pieces there for C.J. Stroud. Now your offense is in a spot where your quarterback just has to be good. He doesn't need to be outstanding. He just needs to be good. This football team needs to score what, Finn? You think 21, 24 points a game? If they
Yeah,
can
behind this
get to
defense, yeah, you'll get it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
if you can get to that number in the playoffs, this is a team that will have a chance to win games next year. And then it's a matter, to your point, can we get younger at defensive tackle? Rankins is getting up there in age. Can we add a guy, again, whether in the draft or one of these guys that didn't pan out, and that was a former first, second, third round pick that we can add and coach up on the defensive side of the football to help get ourselves younger on the defensive line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I don't think this team's that far away. Behind that defense, they just add some more pieces to that defense.
Agreed.
Refill the defensive line a little bit. You don't have to spend big. It's complementary guys around Hunter and Anderson. Get those guys in the door, and then offensively, like you said, offensive line definitely needs to be a priority. But yeah, they're not that far away. I could definitely see them. Texans could be, possibly in the AFC title game next year. I wouldn't be surprised, and that all depends on C.J. Stroud taking another step in his development.
Yes.
To get there.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me. It's going to come down to the quarterback. The quarterback's got to play well, and now Houston's got to set the table for their quarterback to play good, just good enough to win football games. Because he struggled mightily late in the season. So let's see if they can do that this offseason.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that was the Texans. So we are approaching the last team we're going to speak about tonight. So in the NFC. All right, let's see. So who'd you just speak about, Tom? You spoke about the Lions. Okay, we got
The
them off the
Lions,
wheel.
yep.
All right. So, dude, I am 2 for my last 2. Let's see. I'm going to see my prediction.
Philly.
Dude, if I hit this, I think we got to go to Vegas tonight or something.
I'll get on the plane. Don't tempt me.
All right, bro. Here we go. Ready for this one?
Yeah,
Give me the Carolina Panthers.
Okay.
Give it to me. Give it to me. Yo, you can't make it. Dude, I got to go to Vegas. This is it, bro.
I'm hold on. Why don't we pause the recording so I can look up flights, because we're going. Okay. The Carolina Panthers. Despite an 8-9 record, the Panthers made the playoffs for the first time since 2017. Even though they backdoored their way into the playoffs, the Panthers showed signs of promise. Bryce Young played well. Ted McMillan was Rookie of the Year. And now this offseason is a crucial one for a team looking to build on their success. They are currently under the cap. Let me see if I can get the number. So they are currently under the cap around $13 million, and they do have the ability to create more. So where should we start with the Panthers? The first will be extension candidates, and the first one is Bryce Young. The first thing the Panthers will do is they'll pick up the option to pick up Bryce Young's 5th-year option for next season. I assume the Panthers will do that, and that should give them another year to figure out what they want to do with Bryce Young. Bryce was good, not great last year, but he led them to the playoffs and played well enough that I think now an extension will at least be talked about by the two parties. You might need to help me with this name. Ekme Ekwonu, their first round 2022 pick.
Ika Mekwonu, I think it is.
There we go. Ika, I'm gonna absolutely butcher that, everybody. He was their 2022 first round draft pick. He's gonna probably pay or they're gonna pick up the extension on him and then look to extend him this summer. He'll be a no-brainer. He's played well for them in his 4 years with the Panthers. So restructure candidates. How can they create some money up? Well, they can convert Derek Brown's salary for up $14.3 million. They can do the same for J.C. Horn and Trayvon Monroe in the secondary. Taylor Morton the right tackle, they can convert his salary as well, free up $10 million there. And then Treshaun Wharton, they can convert his bonus to his salary to a bonus, and free up $10.2 million. If they make all those moves, they can free up around $50 million. So again, for a team that's around $3 million or $13 million, under the cap, they can free up another $40-50 million. So kind of two players here that they have to make decisions on. The first is Chuba Hubbard. The big thing with Chuba Hubbard is what's going to happen with Jonathan Brooks and what's going to happen with Rico Dowdle. I imagine the Panthers look to keep both. Rico Dowdle, who I'll talk about in a second, was really good for the Panthers. And Jonathan Brooks was a draft pick for them that they're kind of waiting to see what they have in him. He was injured, came back, and then got re-injured. I think with both those guys, the Panthers look to move on from Hubbard. Releasing him won't work with the cap. So they're going to probably look to trade him and float his name out there and see if there's any takers on a guy that could be a number 2 running back for those teams. Tommy Tremble's the other one. He signed in March. He didn't really feature for the Panthers this much this past season. So he can be cut before March 15th, and the Panthers can free up $4.3 million. I assume that's a move they're going to make. Free agents for the Panthers. The first is Kane Mays. Their center, he's projected at $12 million on Spotrac. Had a solid season for the Panthers. The 6th-round draft pick could command a nice payday if he hits free agency, but I like to think the Panthers are going to try and do what they can to keep him and keep some familiarity amongst that line. So K Mays, despite that price, I think they're going to look to keep him. The next is Rico Dowdle. My guess is the Panthers would like to keep him. Spotrac has him projected at $7.6 million. He had an unbelievable season for the Panthers this year in a prove-it deal. He rushed for over 1,000 yards in 17 games. It's his second straight season doing that. Can they make an extension work, or will the Panthers say, we have Chuba Hubbard on the contract, we have him on, we can't move on from him, and we're really going to look to kind of but give Jonathan Brooks the chance that he deserves. I think that will come down to price and what he can get on the upper market. And if a guy like Breece Hall, and Kenneth Walker don't make free agency, you're talking about Rico Dowdle as maybe being the top player that hits free agency. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Linebacker DJ Woonem. Despite a promising 2024 season, he didn't really contribute in the way that the Panthers were hoping. I'm assuming the Panthers are going to move on. His Spotrac value is $5.6 million for that. If it's that price, I think the Panthers look to move on and look to add a linebacker in the draft or free agency. Safety Nick Scott, his value on Spotrac is valued at $5 million. Like Woonem, was solid against the run but struggled against the pass. If the Panthers can add him on a team-friendly deal, I think he could be a nice rotational piece. But odds are I think they let him walk and look to get younger in other areas. And then linebacker Christian Roseboom had an up-and-down year, was really good against the run and struggled against the pass. I think he has a role on this football team. And like the other two I just mentioned, it'll come down to what his price is. He's not priced very high on Spotrac. It's like $3 million. I think at a deal like that, the Panthers would look to bring him back. So, needs. I have 4 positions listed here: wide receiver, offensive tackle, edge, and linebacker. So let's get into those 4. Tet was outstanding as a rookie this year, but their next best receiver was Jalen Coker, who had 394 yards in 11 games. Wide receiver should be a focus for this football team. They should look to add somebody, preferably a different profile, to play with Tet this year. Tackle maybe isn't the biggest priority, but Ekwoknu I butchered that, but he got hurt last year and could miss part of this season. So maybe finding somebody to plug in there can help, and at least maybe to cover themselves in case the tackle struggles to come back from injury. This team needs an edge rusher. They really struggled. They finished ranked 27th in the league in sacks. I think they were last in the NFL in pressure. So this team needs to add a pass rush, whether that's in the draft or in free agency, maybe both. And I think they could use a coverage linebacker. Their linebackers this year played pretty well against the run, but if they can add a guy, and like we'll talk about this as the draft comes, but CJ Allen's a kid that I'm watching right now that I think he's a really talented cover linebacker. He could be in position when they draft. He might go a little before where they draft, but he could be a name that in and around where they draft, that if he's there, they'll jump to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, I feel like this team, they really need like a game wrecker on the edge. I feel like, right, they haven't had anybody like that since Brian Burns was there. I mean, right, Derek Brown, he's a solid player in the middle there, but they really need somebody on the edge that can really like generate the pass rush help for that the defense really needs. Offensive line too. Yeah, I mean Ike Ekwonu, yeah, he's coming off that really bad knee injury, and he's been like okay, but he was like a really highly drafted, like he was like I think a top 2 or 3 pick in the draft. He hasn't really lived up to that hype, right? He's not like a right. I mean, you draft someone that high as an offensive lineman, you expect him to be like an all pro or
Yep.
Pro Bowl type player, and he really hasn't lived up to that hype. And yeah, I agree. Playmakers for Bryce Young are especially needed. He had a really good rookie year, but they need players behind him, and I think Rico Daddle should be a priority for them to bring back. But yeah, they definitely need a receiver out there to put out there with Bryce Young. I think, right, they picked up Young's option, right? His 5th year option, I think, right? Didn't they?
They they've probably already picked it up, and I just missed it.
Yeah, maybe they did. I don't know, but if they haven't, yeah, that's a decision for them. But I think I remember hearing that they did pick it up. But be that as it
I'll
may,
look
yeah,
it
if
up
he's
while
going to
you're
be their
talking.
quarterback going forward, definitely more options are needed to build around him. And I do know that I don't know if it's going to help him or not. I saw a report come out with Carolina that Canellis is no longer calling the plays anymore. He's giving it to OC Brad Idzik. He's going to start calling the plays. I don't know if that is going to make a big difference or not in their offense. Carolina kind of, right, they kind of, I mean, they lucked into making the playoffs last year, right, with how the standings fell last year. They ended up getting in there. They gave the Rams a really good game. They almost beat the Rams, but um, yeah, definitely Carolina just feels like a team that's kind of just been kind of floating and not really kind of stuck in neutral, so kind of, so to speak, over the past, oh God, what, since what they made the Super Bowl with Cam, it's been probably almost 10
Yep.
years, right? That they've kind of just been like one of those mediocre type teams that kind of, doesn't really do too much. So we'll see maybe this year if they can bring in some guys. I mean, some of their other fit, right? So I had pass rush, offensive line, and playmakers. Free agents for the pass rush, I have guys like here like Bradley Chubb or Adafe Owe, right? Ejiro Evero coached Bradley Chubb for a little while when he was the DC in Denver, so I could potentially see a reunion there with Chubb. He could be a good veteran presence on the edge. Adafe Owe would make sense here too. Like, I mean, Adafe Owe had a top 12 pass rush win rate last season, and of course that was when he got traded from the Ravens to the Chargers. He became that good for Jesse Minter. So if he gets free agency, maybe Ejiro Evero feels like he's a guy who could fit into his defense. And then offensively, we talk about weapons here. Bryce Young, like I said, needs more weapons. I think bringing in a tight end here would be great, whether it's David Njoku, Isaiah Likely. I mean, Kyle Pitts, right? I think he just got the franchise tag. So, I mean, they're obviously
Yeah,
not
he
going to
got
trade him to
franchised.
Carolina, so he won't be available. But basically, a middle of the field presence here to take some pressure off of McMillan, who would work the perimeter. And I'm sure they'll be active in the draft for another wide receiver. What pick? Well, they're picking in the 20s, right, Tom? In that
18
Carol.
or 19, I think they pick.
Okay, so maybe
19.
yeah, those are. I mean, that might be a place for what maybe like a Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, somebody like that, maybe that they can make a
Concepcion
move.
would be really fun with Tat.
Mhm.
He'd actually be really,
Great
really fun with
compliment.
Tat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
But very quickly, just to your point on Carolina kind of being like a middle meddling team, it feels like every team in this division is, right? Like Tampa was so well run for so long, and now it looks like they might be coming back down to earth. The best thing going for Carolina is this division is they're all similar. And I want to say they're all not great, but they're all not great football teams. And we talked about New Orleans, and we'll talk about Atlanta and like what these teams are, but they're all kind of middle of the pack football teams. And it feels like when you look at Carolina, they feel like they have the most upside right now outside of Tampa. So if they can shore up a couple of these areas, this is a team that if you go 9-8 next year, you're going to have a chance to win this division. So they just need to shore up a couple of those positions. I really want to see them get Bryce some weapons and as you said, if they can just get a wrecker off the edge. Something I want to mention really quickly that came out of the combine is that the Panthers have mentioned that they've been getting calls for Andy Dalton, who's their backup quarterback. So curious to see what type of compensation they might be able to get for a player like that. Like if you could potentially get a high day 3 or maybe even a day 2 pick, like you're doing yourself really, really well with that. So keep an eye on that.
I mean, I'll say this. I mean, does that just show the state of quarterback play in this league? Andy Dalton's got to be, was he 36, 37? I mean, he's up there in age, and teams are interested in possibly bringing him in as, I mean, I dare I say potential starter to hold the fort, I guess, for a young guy, I guess.
Yep. So we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the Carolina Panthers. So that's the last team we're going to touch on for the night. So we'll take them off the wheel. We have 12 teams remaining. They're all here, and we'll talk about them next week for our closeout of our free agency preview. So that will, and then next week when we have our show talking about them, that will lead us into the following week for free agency. So, yeah, I'll get this up posted soon on the website. Thanks everybody for tuning in and checking us out. As I said earlier, the official Loft Sports podcast can be found wherever you consume your podcast. Check out our website. Tom mentioned earlier he's still working on some more scouting reports. I got a bunch of them posted over the past couple days. So check us out on loftsportus.com. Check out some of the draft scouting reports Tom has up there. I've been putting together some MLB baseball previews. I'm working on the NL West right now. I got a couple of those posted. I'm planning to post a new preview for each team every day going forward until get all 30 posted. So, yep, Loft Sports. Follow us on X, YouTube, and TikTok at Loft Sports USA. Everybody have a good night. We'll see you later.